So the interview tonight, I've read a bunch of stuff with you. Obviously you've done a ton of interviews and that kind of stuff that are kind of floating out there, but they're all kind of like little one-off pieces that go into a lot of different and varied things. As you're a, varied individual, you're involved with so much stuff. But I kind of want to paint a larger picture of your career and how that's evolved and how you've evolved as a creator following like the industry and trends, which I think is something that you are incredibly adept at, and I am really looking forward to getting into talking with you about. And I think that should give us a good opportunity to kind of plug, your project that's going on now and the Patreon page and that stuff. If there's anything going along that you want to talk about, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, if I'm beating a dead horse, let me know. That's why I record these.
I'll
I
tell
can
you the
edit
real stuff, man. Here's the deal. You are the closest to like real comic journalism and real like posterity level kind of media stuff in comics than any. Most interviews are not that. They're just advertorial or just like, where do you get your inspiration? Yeah, that's why I signed up, dude, and watch your stuff. It's like have you heard of Michael Parkinson?
Yeah.
All right, you're like the Parkinson of comics, man. You do these, you get to the heart of like the people, the creatives behind the stuff. So like, and even if I'm not familiar with the creatives, and there's a couple, it's like sometimes they're still interesting. But like, yeah, you got me in with Sam Keith and a few things. So, and image stuff and like Rob Liefeld stuff I grew up watching or reading about and just experiencing, and then not knowing the behind the scenes. Like that was great. So I'll tell you whatever, man, within diplomatic means, maybe. But this is like my version of history on a few things, probably.
Oh man, I can't tell you how much that means. That's honestly why I do what I do. The people who create have played in such an integral part in my life that I've always been interested in that stuff. And when I would talk to people, they're like, where do you learn all this stuff? And I'm like, you don't know that? What, you haven't read Marvel Age 15 from 1992, the Sam Keith interview where he talked? It's terrible.
Yeah, you do research, which is why I'm scared. But well, I'll answer your questions, and I can only ever, like, you could, this bit can be in the thing, but like, it's my perspective.
Yes.
The events happened the way I recollect them. Other people may disagree, but yeah.
So to get into things, I do have to ask the one kind of, sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's fun. How did you get into comics originally?
You mean as a reader, as a person that liked comics?
Whatever matters to you. When did you start reading comics? When did you start drawing comics? Whatever's more important to you.
My vaguest recollection is I got a Christmas present of some sort of, it may have been an Australian printing of it, so it's not like a real thing, just a reprint, but it was like a giant size Fantastic Four thing where with like the Herald of Galactus, the most recent one, the one who he had like weird energy type wing things, and then the Silver Surfer came in and kicked his ass, and then the Fantastic Four did some stuff, but it was a giant size. It was like 14 inches by something, or at least. Lost that, but I read that a lot. But then my grandmother would just, when I'd visit my grandparents, she'd take me on a walk to the local, what you would call a drugstore, newsagent, and I'd pick up pick up a few comics for me, So that was my exposure. So I started in the 90s. Yeah, pretty much in the 90s on Marvel mostly. So Conan the Barbarian, X-Men, Spider-Man. I was very spoiled because all the Image founders were the ones I first read on any book, and I thought that was all comics. But Todd McFarlane on the Hulk is that's just normal, and Eric Larson on Spider-Man, and yeah, and Val Semeiks on Conan. Conan was a big one, really. I liked Conan.
Who was doing Conan when you were reading it?
I don't know how to pronounce the name properly, but I don't remember the writer. Sorry, Roy Thomas probably was doing a few, but Val Semeiks. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But I loved his art. And it was the period where there was very little dialogue in this. It was just Conan wandering around and accidentally meeting like monsters or a few things, or battling nature itself. He's like, he's got to cross a bridge for an entire issue. Don't fall off the bridge, Conan. It was enthralling. So, and that taught me like, oh, storytelling and stories don't have to just be heavily dialogued, and telling people that you're thrusting a sword into them at the moment you're thrusting a sword into them, because no one does that. So, except in a Chris Claremont comic, which I also read.
Well, and it's also very predominant in like English comics. I just talked to Pat Mills, and he literally talked about like you had to write like that because you never knew what you were gonna get back from your artist. So he was like, and with the terrible printing, like you said, they were all reprints. So all those plates are worn out, trashed. I mean, the printing could have been just absolute gobbledygook mess. So a lot of people wrote like that. But it's cool to hear Conan was a jumping
Yeah.
on point.
And I also, like, around the same time I was reading Pat Mills, I guess, because I think he did Nemesis the Warlock and Slain as well. So I picked up Slain as, a lot of them were like Aussie variants of whatever it was. It was a company called Fleetway in Australia. So we got weird reprints of a few things, but the Marvel stuff with my grandmother I picked up were direct from America, I'm pretty sure. And then soon after that, I found my first real comic shop, and my mind was blown because like those were definitely just direct from America, direct market. So yeah.
How'd you make the transition from being a fan and then into becoming a professional artist?
I have no idea. Well, my grandfather, one of them was a printer, so he had he'd have an entire like closet full of off-cut pieces of paper, like long strips that I just started because I was reading comics, and they were just, I read like traditional cartoon comic type stuff like Hagar the Horrible and stuff like that too, and Garfield. So, they were long strips. So I just started doing comics in these long strips because they were just left to right. So I would always dabble because I like to draw, But further on from that, I kept honing my craft. I had no social life. I just wanted to do art for a living. I didn't really want to do comics. I wanted to be a paleontologist and draw dinosaurs first, but I kept at it. And, back in the 90s, whatever it was, you had message boards and people with similar interests talking about comics and stuff. And there was a lot of budding artists. So we all post our artwork. And eventually I got seen by a couple of people in America because I was in Australia at the time. And I actually broke in twice. So when people say they get their lucky break, I kind of got two lucky breaks almost at the same time. So a guy named Joe Casey contacted me and said, hey, I'd like you to, do you want to do this project? This is my vague recollection. Joe probably would remember it more because it was his thing. And he was already in comics. So I thought, ooh, this is the big time here, maybe. This is a chance. So he wanted to pitch a project called the Darwin Theory to Vertigo when Vertigo was still alive. And it got greenlit. But in order to help that along, my first technical published work was on a book he was doing at Image at the time called Code Flesh. I'm not sure if it was issue 4 or 5, but it should have been. It's one with a big red cover. He said, look, we just got to get you like a name credit, something to show you're around sort of thing. So I did my very best attempt and the only time to color traditionally on computer, because computers were starting to come in then. But I had no idea what I was doing. But I had to try and color Charlie Adlard's artwork on Code Flesh, written by Joe Casey. I did that. I did a passable job. It was very mediocre. I didn't know what I was doing, but it looked okay and sent them off. That was my first technical published work. First issue came out, was in color, but I think the sales were kind of so crappy on that book that they switched to gray tones after that. So I'd done color work that was then printed in gray. So, which destroyed any notion of what I was trying to do in the color. But anyway, that got the thing greenlit. And my first editor was Heidi McDonald. And I did about 30 pages of this project called the Darwin Theory, which I don't remember too much about, except it was like there's an agent guy dealing with some sort of phenomena, science-y fiction-y type cool stuff. I liked the work. But Heidi McDonald, I forget if she got fired or just resigned or whatever. What happened with all of that? That was news to me. But anything that wasn't already published was shit canned. I got paid for the work I did. So somewhere out there, and my hard drives long ago died. So, and I don't know where the originals are. They might be stored at my parents' house back in Australia. But those, I did 30 pages that have never been seen. And I don't even remember what they look like. So that didn't happen. But around that exact same time, the art director for Todd McFarlane Productions contacted me because he'd shown some stuff I did from the forum, one of the forums that he apparently hung out at, to Todd. And his name is Brent Ash. I owe him a big debt. And so they asked me to try out. I thought for the Sam and Twitch comic, they were going to be doing it at that time. And because I was a huge Ashley Wood fan, and he had got me into comics in a way because he was from my hometown. He had like a decade on me. So he had already started working for the mainstream American stuff. But I grew up reading some of his earlier stuff that was only in Australia, called The Undertaker, Morton Stone, The Undertaker. So I knew that Aussie talent was actually, can be pretty good and good quality enough to get into America. I'm like, oh, I'll keep trying at that. So he was leaving for some reason Todd McFarlane Productions, because he was my hero because he was working with Todd. He was doing Spawn. Well, he wasn't doing Spawn. He was doing a book called Hellspawn. So it turned out the samples I sent them weren't for, well, they ended up being for a different thing. Well, they applied them and asked me to do Hellspawn because Ash had left with 4 pages left to go on an issue called Hellspawn, I want to say 10. So my first real published comic work was the final 4 pages of a Hellspawn issue. And for some reason, they used one of my samples as the first cover. So my first cover is something I never realized would ever be a cover. And then the next issue was my first full issue. I guess that would be issue 11. And it had an Ashley Wood cover. So, another achievement unlocked. I'm like, yeah, Ash had a cover. And I went on from there. And that's how I met Steve Niles. And then that's how everything else started, the ball rolling. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome.
That was a long-winded, sorry.
No, that's exactly what I want. I was getting ready to say you already knocked Hellspawn off my list, so we don't have to talk about that. And that is awesome about the cover. Man, it is a very striking cover, and to think that was a sample, no wonder you got picked up.
Well, I hope we're talking about the same cover. Had I known it was a cover, though, I would have done a little more, and I would have made it a bigger image. I sold it long ago. Little did I know that I shouldn't probably have done that. But if I was going to sell it, I would have made it an even a bigger, more expansive piece or something. But
I've always enjoyed the minimalism of your work. I personally thought it was a gorgeous cover, especially for your first published piece. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. To find out that was
well,
wow.
It was just Hellspawn standing there with like a sickle, I think.
Yeah.
In front of him. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was. At that time, everybody was lines everywhere, more everything, and we need to put every brick on everything behind everyone, and shell casings and blood, and
yeah, I like that stuff, and I like it more now, but that was the 90s, man.
I'm all
detail and rendering,
stuff.
And the dynamism mattered, so not so much anymore.
Well,
styles change.
I was gonna say times change, whatever. I know what I love, and that's Sam Keith in 1994. So I'll stay where I'm at.
Oh yeah, the Max blew my mind as well. So yeah, he was a big influence, and so was Ash and Dave McKean and a few other people in there. But yeah, interesting.
I love Ashley Wood, and I had no idea that you guys were from the same town.
We actually shared a studio for a little while.
I knew that, but I didn't know how you guys got hooked up.
Well, we never. Well, because we were, when you're both working in comics in the one isolated city. Singapore is closer to where I came from than Sydney in Australia. We were we only just got COVID. So for 2 years without COVID, because they just closed the border because no one cared. So, but now they're getting COVID. So yeah, So, we just hung out a little. He never turned up to the studio when I did, and I never probably, according to him, turned up at the studio when he did. So we never really hung out in the workplace too much. But yeah, it was nice. And my fondest memory is trying to dumping a couch in the parking lot with him, his idea, when we were moving out, and having an old lady accost us for saying you can't do that, and he was insisting, swearing blind he had permission and all this stuff. Yeah, he's a genius, and now he's in the stratosphere, and yeah, you cannot stop that talent.
No, Ashley Wood has always blown my mind, and every time I see his stuff, it's always different, which I absolutely love. Like, he's always tackling something new and moving, like pushing his art in a new direction, adding new elements to mixed media stuff, or just completely working with his anatomy. Mind-blowing stuff.
He would be a great guy to get an interview just because I'm a fan, so I want to hear all his life. So,
well, when Ashley Wood gets back to me, well, he will be on the channel. Rest assured, man.
Yeah, he doesn't get back to many people, I hear, these days. I haven't spoken to him in years, so, but I hope he's well. I assume he's very well. His art's still amazing. So, but yes, he was very formative for me. So
when I reach out, I'll make sure to name drop you, and try to.
I hope he doesn't hate my guts or anything, because I always feel like I'm in his shadow and that I'm derivative of him, although I try not to be. I'm just trying to be me. I have other influences, I promise, but yeah, no, he'd be a big one. Certainly early on, I was wearing my influences on my sleeve. So plus I was following him on Hellspawn, and I hate it when artists change, a book completely changes style because a different artist comes and takes over. I hated that, so I didn't want to do that to a reader. So
interesting,
at least in the first phase, and then after that I was just raw and learning. So
from Hellspawn, you moved into doing work for IDW, and that would be a very formative part of your career, to say the least. Can you talk a little bit about getting hooked up with Steve Niles and how all of that originally came to be?
Well, that was because of Hellspawn, because he took over from Bendis on Hellspawn before I came on as or at the same time, I think. I'm not sure. Timelines, there were periods of months where you don't know things. So, because people don't tell you things. So, yeah, I came on, he was the writer, and the approvals got slower and slower on like the work. So it was a monthly book to begin with, but it just got slower and slower because I have no idea what was happening in the actual office or if they were swamped or what the deal was. But we had a lot of spare time. And so, you chat with the writer, and he had a whole list of other things, of projects that he wanted to do. It's like, should we do a different thing in the meantime and try and get it published somewhere? So he had an entire list of projects, which all ended up pretty much becoming comics at some point. And I picked one called 30 Days a Night. I picked it from his list. That's my version of history. With a little synopsis, like, oh, that sounds cool. But the reason I picked it is because it reminded me of The Thing, which is one of my favorite movies, John Carpenter's The Thing, and just the isolation in the Arctic and stuff, and with vampires, because I like horror. So I'm stuck in Australia. I don't know how it got to IDW. I assumed he pitched it, and he pitched it to a few people. Dark Horse said no, and I guess a few other publishers said no. But IDW, who had only ever done one book at that point, which was Ashley Wood's, an issue maybe of Ashley Wood's Popbot, I think. They said yes. I think Steve may have had prior connections to the boss at the time of IDW, Ted Adams. So they said yes, and it was their first regular format, normal comic. It was a 3-issue miniseries. And here's my version of history again, which I'm sure the accounting would back up this one. The first issue sold terribly, and this is in many interviews anyway. The first issue sold terribly. It sold like 3,000 copies. Today, that might be a good number. I don't know. But so they came back to me and said, look, Ben, we were paying you $120, I think it is, a page, because I did the whole thing. The book didn't really sell well, so we can't really afford to pay you to do the other 2 issues to finish it. But if you do want to do them, we'll still publish them. And because I was still living the dream just doing comics, I'm like, of course, I just want to finish this thing. This is a cool thing. So between me agreeing to just finish the book for free and any other stuff coming out to do with that book, they had apparently been going around pitching it to, I guess, as a movie. And the bidding war started, and it was all because they were taking this pitch book around, and a pitch book is just a book showing some pages and some backup art. I did a lot of backup art. I did drawings like all the vampire characters and whatnot and the main characters. So they took that around and showed people, and apparently what I was told later on by the producer of Ghost House, one of the main producing partner of Sam Raimi, was that 50% of the reason they wanted the property was the concept, 30, the Arctic winter and vampires with no sun. And the other half was like the artwork in the book sold it for the mood and for everything like that. So that's what he told me. So I'll believe the guy that spent money on getting a thing. So so while I was working on the book for free, that was all happening. And then, so by the time the movie news broke, the trade was ready. And so the trade did really well. And it got a lot of attention. The news of the option being $1 million option split between like 11 people. No one got $1 million. And that would be only once it would have hit production and stuff as well. That raised my profile enough that 30 Days, the graphic novel, did really well. And then I had a career after that, and people vaguely knew who I was. And 50% of people hated my work and told me about it, and 50% liked it. And I don't hear from the people that hate it anymore, which is nice. So I was very familiar early on with people not liking non-traditional art as well. So, and I did eventually, because of the success and everything, they did pay me for those 2 issues because, there was money then. And so I'm not saying I was ripped off or anything. I'm saying I did that work for free. Because what if I had said, oh, no, then there would have been no book.
No movie.
And that book has sold like at least 100,000 copies over the years of that trade, and in various formats probably too. But yeah, so.
And many.
And I honestly, when I was told about the film option of Sam Raimi's Ghost House pictures for the movie version on Instant Messenger, I think it was back in the day. And I think Steve liked to say that my reaction was somewhat muted. And it was probably because I wasn't hugely into Sam Raimi, the Evil Dead movies. I mean, I liked them, but I was just really excited to still be in comics. So the movie thing was like, oh yeah, that's just another thing that happens. That's nice, but I'm in comics. So I didn't probably appreciate the gravitas of like the monumental, because that didn't happen. That was before Marvel movies and before everything was getting optioned and everything. So it was one of the ones that I'm sure you'll ask me, broke at least horror comics into the mainstream a little more, because it was before Twilight as well. Before Twilight ruined vampires again. So.
No, I think that you're Steve Niles as well, but I think you guys have both been integral in not just reintroducing horror to comic books, but also pivotal. Every few generations, it seems like people come along and they build on that old EC tradition. They take it and they change it and they make it that generation's own, and they tailor it in a way that people can absorb and take in, and the mainstream is able to accept it for whatever time at that point. And 30 Days of Night that series has been around for a long time now and does not show any signs of going away. It just keeps popping up.
Well, I think it's been done to death at this point. I think it's a little like Star Trek before the reboot. They took them into space. They did a NFL game. I don't know what the hell they've been doing with it, but I think they've run it into the ground somewhat. But I'm in the basic original book and the original trilogy, because it was successful. So we did 2 more. That'll stand the test of time enough, but even if I hate my art in it now. But I also had no real knowledge of previous horror comics. So I just came in as a kid of the 90s, growing up on Marvel superhero stuff. But I liked horror my way anyway, so I just did what I wanted to do. And that was pure luck. And because I liked the John Carpenter's The Thing, and I wanted to try and get that vibe in, and I had this new thing called Photoshop, which not many people were using differently at that time. And it just came together, I guess. It was luck. It was very raw stuff, and I was probably putting photographic elements in it a lot more than I do now, but I'm happy it made some people happy. and got me a career. So yeah. The movie didn't get me a career. I always tell people the news of the option and the hype around all that, because the movie didn't come out till 2007. So the movie itself did nothing. The news of the movie and of a Hollywood connection was what benefited me and Steve. And Steve has the best concepts. He had a lot of good concepts, and that was, one that hit.
I just thought it was funny. Steve Niles had written that from what I understand, Steve Niles originally wrote it as a script, got turned down by everybody, then got picked up as a comic. Then your art is what sold his script to make the movie. I just thought that was just brilliant.
Well, it correlates, and there's a lot of that now in comics, and you get producers and screenwriters asking you to adapt their screenplays and whatnot. But the thing with the 30 Days, like, yes, I'm sure he did write it as a screenplay first. So he did have a pretty good script ready to go. And I did hear from the horse's mouth from a producer that 50% of it was the concept, but it was the pitch book. Then they don't do pitch books anymore, apparently, because it's all just on PDF. But there was physical copies. I'm not sure how many there were. I never saw one because I was in Australia. But they go for a lot of money now, because there's still a few out there. And a friend of mine managed to buy one, and he won't tell me for how much, but it has all the original illustrations I did, which I'm sure you can find online somewhere too, just illustrations of the vampires. And some of them, like literally my handwriting on a t-shirt, because I put a t-shirt on one, made it into the movie. The costume department literally adapted my illustration of what was on the t-shirt, but you can't really see it in the movie because it was too dark. But yeah, I went to the set, I saw it existed.
That's great, man. I actually had a copy of the spiral bound copy of the first issue, but I've never seen that press kit.
Spiral bound copy of the first issue?
Yeah,
that may have been it.
I don't think so.
Or was that a separate sort of advanced?
It was, yeah, it was like I was working at an LCS at the time, and I was really into like trying to get any indie books that sounded interesting into the shop at the time, because I was just...
You know how much money that, at least at one point, would have been worth?
Yeah, I do know how much they still go for. Like, I remember hearing, when I talked to a couple of people, that I've heard that there's less than 100 of them that were ever made. And
I believe it.
Yeah, my entire collection got stolen from me. Somebody broke into my house and stole, well, because they knew they were all nicely stored away in the little top holders and all of that, so they knew they were expensive. But it was like winter, and I remember going to the comic shop, and they were like, "Oh, there were guys who just came in and they had them and they left," and I'm like, "Yes, I've got these guys. I know who they are." And in the dumpster back behind there was a huge pile of mushy gush that used to be my collection.
It's a special place in hell for those people.
Sorry. Anyway, digression.
Well, I never even got a copy of that. So some of what I'm telling you is just, I know stuff happened in America because I was in Australia. So I can only tell you what I was told. And but I do know those things exist because I have seen one. I've signed a couple, but yeah, I never got one, and I know they're worth a lot of money. And that pitch book is pretty much what I owe my career to. So it was another spiral bound just thing. So yeah.
So speaking of your career, Cal McDonald. Let's talk about Cal McDonald. I love me some. Where did Cal McDonald come from? Where did that start off?
Okay. I was a young, naive, very enthusiastic person who had just got into comics and everything was golden, and I just apparently sold a movie off one of my first comic, technically my first finished like full story comic, because Hellspawn was just an ongoing thing. So I literally went to my first, I'm not sure when I signed the contract. Maybe it was at the same time. I know I had a meeting. So the first time I ever go to America, go to a comic convention, it's the San Diego Comic Convention when it's big. I signed the movie deal paperwork there because that had to be done. And then I also have, because apparently we're a hot property. Steve and I as a team at that moment. So I'm just living the dream. And Steve says, I have this other thing. Dark Horse really want to do it. I'm like, oh, Dark Horse, because I love I'm pretty sure had Hellboy had come out by that point. So I was really big into Hellboy and a few of the other things from Legend at that time. And of course I said yes. And I realized later on, and I'm not bitching, but I will tell the truth in that. So Cal McDonald is Steve's thing, and he's had it previously published with other stories of Cal McDonald in various places. It's his thing from ways back. And I didn't know that initially. I just thought, oh, this will be another new thing like 30 days. So I was under a different impression. That's ignorance on my part, probably. So I said yes, and it was going to be a 5-issue miniseries. What was it called? Criminal Macabre. Macabre. That's how you say it. And so I learned a lot of people don't know how to say certain words in that because they don't come up too much. But hopefully, we've taught a few people how to say macabre. It's not macabre. But I realized much later on that I was coming on as a work for hire artist on a creator-owned book. And the deal with creator-owned books at Dark Horse were you got, I think it was 22 pages that were like you were paid in advance for, whatnot. And then and you could still fill out the rest of the book of the 32 pages if you so required, but that was up to you. And that's fine for a creator-owned book because it's your own book. But I was also a work for hire artist on that book. So I only got, and they only pay for 22 pages. So I did 5 issues of 22 pages each that I got paid for. But the scripts would always run a bit long. So they'd be going to 25 pages. I think one was 27 pages. It turned out I ended up doing an extra, for no particular reason, 18 extra pages. And I think I gave the last issue to Scott Alley, the editor of the book, who was also the Hellboy editor and who has an interesting storied history now in comics. Not all good. He was my second editor, technically. I gave him like a burnt CD at the next San Diego Comic-Con of the final issue, which had nearly killed me to do. But yeah, I realized later on I did 18 extra pages for, not for no reason, but to finish the book. But like, yeah, I was a work for hire on it. So it wouldn't have been any sort of deal like 30 Days a Night, which was a bit annoying. But I also learned that the hard way. And that made me realize if I want to have some success and do things where I'm not necessarily in control, but I have some sort of say in steering my career, I can either work with other writers or write myself. Because I always wanted to tell stories. I didn't want to just be an artist. I wanted to tell my own stories. I had no delusions of grandeur that I was Shakespeare, though, or that I'd sell a movie for everything. I just wanted to have fun. So that was the beginning of me getting ideas of, I should do my own books as well. And I still had a really good relationship with IDW. Met my first wife there. We had done like 2 follow-ups to 30 Days at that point. So I'd spent the last 4 years drawing nothing but vampires and Cal McDonald, I think, at that point. So yeah, so that Cal McDonald, it was a fun book. He's a monster hunter guy. I'm still ashamed of a lot of that art, but it did teach me a few things, that project. So see, that's the real shit.
You're ashamed of that? God, oh my God.
No, I'm ashamed of most of my work as soon as I finish it, for the record. But I hope I'm improving every day. Well, if you don't want to improve your art, you're pretty much dead as an artist. So, and they do say, like at least in fine art, painters not considered usually to be at their peak until the age of 64. There's ageism in comics, so that ain't going to be true for me. But yeah.
So, you talked about moving into stuff that you controlled a little bit more. Is that where Bloodstained Sword came from? Where did that grow out of?
Well, it's just that I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, so to speak. And I noticed, to do with the entertainment media, and particularly journalism in entertainment media, which isn't really journalism, it's just gossip mostly. But the artist never gets mentioned when anything happens with a property. It's only the writer. I mean, we definitely live in the age of the writer now, but the larger world do not understand how comics work, and that there's actually usually at least 2 people who make a comic, and that the artist is actually integral and is the everything but the screenwriter. They're the director, they're the costume designer, they're the art director, they're the photography, cinematography, they're everything on the paper though. So I think I'd already done my first thing where I wrote myself with IDW, which was called Singularity 7. But my chronology, you'd have to check the chronology because I don't remember. But Bloodstained Sword was me just wanting to help out and help boost a friend of mine called Dan Wickline and give him a shot at writing a relatively quick little book, not like an expansive big mini series or an ongoing thing or anything, just as a one shot. And it was a fun little story. It's sort of like Japanese kind of elements and like, I think cyber kind of stuff. It did okay. It was probably my first, I'm not going to say it did badly. It did all right, but it didn't do as well as I'd hoped. Put it that way. It didn't set the world on fire, but I wanted to help a friend and raise his profile somewhat. So it was the first time I got to say, hey, I could do this thing and then help and I want to work with you and let's do it. So yeah, I liked realizing I had a small amount of profile that I could do that. So that's how that book happened. It was a one shot. And I think it was probably my first exposure to the economics of comics in that, well, it was probably a high priced prestige format one shot, which like, oh, they probably don't do as well. And maybe you shouldn't price it that high. But then IDW always had higher prices and was eternally bitched about. I think they were $3.99 books at the time when no one else was doing that. And so I'd always explain like, well, it's small press and it's not Marvel DC. There's no economy of scale. And these are real people who the creator will only make money potentially if the book sells. So it's based on sales. So we charge an extra $1. If you have a problem with that, go to Marvel or DC, where you just get a nice page rate. So I always worked on the back end, really. So I didn't expect money for work. I expected to share in the sales and the success of any project I did. So, and I still believe that. So
That seems historically like the way to go with comic books. Everybody who is intelligent enough to come at the industry that way, especially when you're coming into the industry, it usually pays dividends, but it is hard starting off that way. Like most
it's
people,
hard. It's hard now,
yeah,
but
yeah, I can only imagine, man.
yeah, I see a lot of people like on crowdfunding that they ask for their pay rate. Basically, they want to be paid before they even do the book. And I never really approach things that way. I just like, look, I'll do the work. I have passion for whatever I'm doing. And it's up to the world. If they want to buy a copy, great. Then I've had success. Because that to me is much more fulfilling than saying, well, I'll only do this if I get X number of dollars per page. So it's just, I don't see it that way. I mean, I live in hope that it'll sell. That drives me to try and do a good job, hopefully. So, but hey, I like money, so I like money jobs. I'll draw what you want for money. So, but I have a clear delineation between those two sort of sides of working. So, not that I don't put work in when people are paying me, because I do. But I prefer to rise and fall on my own merits rather than just being paid, expecting to like, this is my monetary value. And yeah, no.
So another thing that you have become very synonymous with is work outside of the comic book industry as an illustrator. Did that come as a
Really? You tell me, man.
well, yes, a lot of the images that people have seen, I've seen your artwork pop up all over the place, man. I mean, it just seems like you are extremely not only varied in your style, but you can also kind of tailor the I don't even know how to explain it, like the aesthetic of whatever you're doing. Although you're really well known for horror stuff, I've seen other pieces of your work that exude anything but dark and foreboding or scary vibes. I think you're just as adept at creating images of anything that you're tasked with doing, which is what makes you such a good comic book artist. Because most comic book artists now are good at like stuff blowing up or babes or scary stories or
I wish I was good at babes, because that stuff always sells. There's a lowest common denominator to that. I can't draw good boobs, let's be honest. I'm going to try, though. So I'm getting back to the 90s stuff a little. But I don't know what you've seen. I figured most of my work always has that sort of darker, kind of weird streak running through it. I mean, one thing I have going for me is my work's relatively identifiable. I know that. I would say the biggest thing I've ever done, and it was a comic though, initially, was a comic prequel series for Dead Space, the game. And they used that had a marketing budget, so that was like the biggest payday I've ever had for comic work. And it was very different from regular comics in that they thanked you for working with them as a creative, rather than the norm in comics, which is the sense that you should thank them for allowing you to work in comics, because everyone wants to work in comics, and the powers that be that control the industry, they know it. So that went on to be some sort of weird web motion comic on Xbox Live, and that had like 2 million downloads. So I'm pretty sure that exposed a whole bunch of new people to my work. But that was horror. So I don't know. I've done a few advertising jobs. I've done some weird stuff, but I'm not sure what you've seen that is not. That's like very different from horror, shall we say?
Very specifically, whenever I was referring to you being capable of whatever's put in front of you, I've seen commissions.
I'd like to say yes, I am, but
well, I've seen commissions that you've done that people have gotten from you, especially at shows and stuff. And there are most people obviously are going to come and they're going to ask for horror stuff, and there's going to be a darker aesthetic. But I've seen some of your stuff that really it has the very identifiable Templesmith feel to the soft color palettes and the fluidity of shape and that kind of and kind of the freedom of motion. But it also, I specifically, I saw a Max piece that you did, and Mr. Gone was very intimidating, but you captured the lightness of the Max also. He's not needlessly like grim and dark and gritty and sitting in a room, which is where most people would assume Ben Templesmith.
That's what I like. I like doing him like that. I would, but yeah. No. So commissions at shows are where I get to do things I never would have thought that I would potentially do, but I want to make someone happy and I treat it as a challenge. I like a challenge. And I think doing commissions helps me evolve a little and become a better artist. There's also time constraints and the fact I may not have had much sleep and I've got this challenge to make this thing look good. So it really trains you. So yeah. If you're talking commissions, I've probably done some of the weirdest requests that I never would have thought of. But the Mac, I've done a couple. I've done one of the Macs, and I did one directly with Mr. Gone relatively recently, I think, and they were fun ones because that's characters that are more up my alley. And then you have Sam Keith style, which is already distorted and kind of interesting. I'm a fan, so it's hard not to have some of that rub off. Hopefully, so yeah. I'm glad you think that I managed to be adequate. I'll go that far. I don't take compliments well.
All right, Sam Keith. Jeez, man.
No, I love Sam Keith. My one little weird thing with that Sam Keith is I've never met him. I love his work. I spent a year literally working in the offices of IDW. He randomly, because he knows a couple of people there, I'm sure, because he has a history with IDW too now. But he randomly phoned up and wanted to talk to me at one point. I'm like, why? I mean, this is like an idol to me. And I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. And I can't remember what was said or the reason for the call. To me, there wasn't a reason. It was just like, hi, nice to meet you. But I hope I didn't piss him off or anything. I might have said something accidentally that rubbed him the wrong way or something. So I want to apologize to him because I think he's great. So, you know a lot more about Sam Keith than I did.
No, Sam's kind of a tragic. I learned to read because of a Sam Keith comic. I'm extremely dyslexic and dysgraphic, and no one could figure out what was going on. And I remember reading Hulk 368 and was like, I'm gonna figure out how to read this because this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, that with Mr. Was it Mr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde?
Yep.
Dude, yeah, no, that comic also helped change my life. I mean, I already could, no offense, I didn't have dyslexia, so I could just read it. But the artwork was yeah, and it was a weird story, and yeah. No, and the Max was probably one of the earliest, most complex kind of stories I've ever read before the Vertigo stuff, and before I thought comics could be a lot more than just people punching each other. So yeah, no, I owe him a big debt. So I won't put it out there. It's like I apologize for whatever I did.
No, I mean he's
I'd love to get him to
incredible.
do a cover or something.
I'm obsessed with Sam, and what I
Yeah,
was gonna
he's
say,
great.
well, what I was gonna say is I've spent the better part of the last 2 years researching him to put out this documentary series that I've gotten, and I even talked to William Mesner Lopes for 4 hours. You know, co-creator of the Max. I wrote the first 16
Yeah.
issues of the Max with him. Bill hasn't talked to him in a decade. Doesn't know his phone number, doesn't know an email. When Michelle Fife was trying to do a pinup for one of his issues of Copra, he called up Image and he's like, "Hey, can I get a hold of Sam?" And they're like, "Yeah, we did put out all the collections of this stuff, but nobody knows how to get a hold of Sam." So I talked to like 35 people who have worked with him. One guy one guy, a random intern who did a Max parody book for Don Chin in the 90s that worked on one issue of the Max, still has Sam's contact number. And when I talked to him, he's like, "Yeah, Sam will send me an email every few years, and mostly it's just apologizing for being a hermit, not talking to anyone, and then he disappears
Oh,
again." I'm like, oh my God,
I do know an amazing artist who I think does keep in touch with him, and he has shades of Sam Keith. If you've ever heard of Jonathan Wayshak, he does do some comics, but he's just a brilliant artist in the first place. But they're kind of birds of a feather artistically anyway. But I get a sense that they vaguely communicate.
I,
But
I know they do. Wayshak did a cover for
oh,
Batman
good.
Max. Yeah.
Yeah, I've met him. He's a super cool guy. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just sharing the love of Matt of
Yeah.
Sam
No,
Keith.
sorry. I'm
No,
stuck.
he's important anyway. No,
I'm
he's very important.
I'm stuck in Sam Keith mode. I've been
You
there.
just got me on another historic memory because my memory is crap, but I have certain highlights that I can pick when they're triggered, I guess. So I don't even know what we're talking about.
So next big thing I want to talk about, Fell. That
Yeah.
I mean, there are comics and then there are comic books. And Fell was one of the books that was I fell in love with the Max when it came out, second wave, but I always felt like Image relied far too much on the art and never put enough solid books out to follow up that lineage for a long time. And Fell was one of the first books that I could point to as elevating the medium again. I mean, a truly masterful combination of your art was stunning, the writing was absolutely phenomenal on their own, but when you put them together, you had something that was truly revolutionary, in my opinion. Can you talk a little bit about how Fell came to be and how that series started?
I can tell you exactly how that thing went. Uh, so yeah, I guess it was at the time when like Image is weird because they were feast and famine for a long time. So like you had the 90s and artists were king. Obviously, Image was all about that. That's how Image happened. So I forget when the true crossover happened, but Warren, had been big for a while, and I was already subscribed to his mailing list thing. I forget what it was called because he's had several. And he had his Warren Ellis forum, which is now ignored. Like people don't talk about it anymore because of various things. But I was vaguely on there, and I met some friends there who I still keep in touch with, people I know, because it was one of those formative things. A lot of people did. It made half the comic industry, to be honest. So I every now and again show a picture up there and stuff, and I think he commented once or twice, like, "Oh, that's really nice," or something complimentary. So I was subscribed to his mailing list, and because I would work in Australia on American hours, pretty much, I was up and working at 3 a.m., 2 a.m. doing my stuff, and that was my day. And I got an email from him, not an email from him, but one of his newsletters. And he was probably musing that he has a project he wants to do, but no one will work on it because there's no money for it. You can't pay, and it will be the concept behind it would mean it probably wouldn't be lucrative, shall we say. He was downplaying it, but he was probably daring someone to come up and say, yeah, I'll do it. And me stupidly at 2 a.m. in the morning immediately replied saying, hey, I'll do it. Because it wasn't about upfront money. Because you needed an artist that wasn't willing to say, hey, I need to be paid this much to even start. Like, that was never how I worked anyway. Like, oh, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And he immediately emailed me back, and it was probably the biggest compliment I've ever got in my life, that, no offense to anyone else, actually meant something. And he said, oh, good, I've been wanting to work with you for ages. Words to that effect. It was very similar to that, because those are things you don't forget when someone who you grew up reading, like Transmet, was pretty formative for me. So I'm like, oh, my life is now made for a second time. My bucket list is complete. So that book, I was really only known as a horror guy at that point. And it was kind of, no one wants to be typecast unless they're very happy to do what they do. I wanted to do a lot of things. So the fact I got to work with him as the next major writer on a book that made some impact was very good for me. And I owe him a big debt. I didn't know how much work I was in for when I agreed to it. But the concept was that it would be a $1.99 comic, only 16 pages, but those 16 pages were a grid format, which I think I'd already just worked with Matt Fraction on a spin-off thing from 30 Days, which was an 8-panel grid format. And it was like a quick mini series. So 30 Days of Night, something or other. I forget the name. You will know, as someone who does research, I'm sure it had clowns in it. That book nearly destroyed me because of the 8-panel grid format, because there's a lot less creativity in it on the macro scale. But on the micro scale, there's a lot of creativity because it's about storytelling. When it's just a pure grid, you don't have a lot of visual things you can do, and it's a lot of work. So that book nearly killed me. But because I'd done that book, I already knew what I was getting into a little with Fell's 9-panel grid format, which Warren taught me as a creative how pacing can work and how true storytelling can work when you're working within constraints. So that book taught me on an awful lot. And I do think he was pretty much on the top of his game with that book. Little did I know at the time, that it would be successful. I was just happy to work with him and work in comics. So, it was a lot of work. And then eventually the scripts got a little later and later. And my recollection and from what I know is it was very tough to write. So it's, there are easy things to write and hard things. And apparently Fell was very complicated and a lot of work. So, and he was a man of many things at the time as well. So he jumped around a lot. But I'm not sure if that was wasn't his first Image book, but I know he was at the time doing a lot of stuff with Avatar, I think. And so the Fell was a nice big Image thing, because Image was a big platform and still is. But yeah. So that's how that book happened, from a 4 a.m. reply or 2 a.m. reply to one of his email newsletter broadcasts. So the end.
That's interesting to hear about how everything kind of came into play, because I wondered, I haven't been able to find it. There's quite a bit of information kind of disappearing about his career, unfortunately, at this point. A lot of stuff is just not accessible like it used to be.
That's why it's important to get a lot of stuff on record, really. And that's why you are one for the archives, my friend.
I truly,
for better or worse, good news, bad news. Things happened, and history is history in publishing.
And great books are great books, and Fell is a great book. And I know that he fell, to say he fell behind would be an understatement, but I also know that a point has been reached where he actually has issues done now, and Image retracted because there was an announcement made that Fell was going to come out, and I'm crapping myself. And then
there was a lot of stuff not to do with me that, like, plans had been made, I think, and then I guess I was a bit of a trial balloon in that, like, can he come back and do some comics now? Is he over his personal issues? I guess not. I have some script I would like to work on and finish, because the book was basically in two halves. The plan is, or it still is, hopefully one day, 16 issues or issues worth of content. So the first collected book is 8 issues, and then there was a 9th issue. And so there's 7 issues to complete. And he has written an awful lot of that. And I vaguely started on some pages. I'd like to finish them one day, knowing it'll come out. Just because I'm a completist, it's like a monkey on my back. I never forgot the book. I will still happily work on it, although I just have to make sure I can survive in the meantime. But we will see, because I don't know how you deal with his personal issues, which I won't get into because they're his. And it's never fun for anyone to talk about your personal life in a public forum. But he did some questionable things, and he's paying a price for that. But he is one of the greats, or was one of the greats of comics, and I'd like him to still be around, So that's initially how we got talking again, and how Fell was going to come back. And I was kind of checking in on him because he's done so much for me. It's the least I could do. So I owe him a debt that can probably never be paid. But yeah, so. And a lot of comic creators, when they're like marriages in many ways. There's relationships there. So for better or worse, some of them are very, divorces happen too. So, but yeah, so who knows what the future will bring for it one day. We will see. We will see.
Can you talk a little bit about your artistic approach to Fell? Like, you were talking about how the layout of that pushed you artistically. Has that played a big part in the rest of your career? Because it felt like 30 Days of Night obviously was one, basically your first really big project. You're sinking your teeth into it. You could just see every panel you were trying to push yourself and evolve, and you've always done different things with your art, but with Fell especially after that, I saw your storytelling ability increase exponentially. And I was wondering how big of a part Fell actually played in that, or if it was just something that was going on in your life and you were figuring out the craft more.
So the way Steve wrote at the time, at least, I can't say for now, but his scripts were very free. So a lot of the page layouts, and I mean, his scripts are basically, there's this number of panels on a page. Here's some of what they say. Make that work on a page. And like, great. So I had fun, but I was still learning, obviously. Still am. Fell was a very different experience in that a lot of what you're complimenting there is Warren, not me, honestly. He, because it was a grid format, and sometimes he'd break the format for pacing like, because it's 3 rows of 3 panels, he'd be dictating like, so the top row is all 1 panel of the 3 panels. And so I was following things to the letter, but everything had to happen within a certain size panel. So my challenge was to make that all work, but he was the one directing very much the storytelling of that. And it did teach me an awful lot about storytelling, especially when you have like an interrogation scene across 4 pages of 9 panels where you're just in a room with 2 people. How do you vaguely attempt to keep that interesting and not just have the same talking headshots the whole time? Different angles, different things. I tried my best. But yeah, a lot of that was down to Warren, and that taught me a lot. It also taught me because I saw some of his scripts before they were finished too, so I understood how he was writing it and how key dialogue can be, and then you just chop it up into the panels to make it work that way. But the dialogue keeps the rhythm and whatnot. So, I mean, I guess I still hopefully use a little bit of the ideas of pacing sometimes that I got from Fell, but I would never in my life voluntarily myself do a grid format book again, because they're a lot of work. You have to put a lot more information into them. It's very deceptive. I mean, it's much easier to just draw, oh, this panel's huge and it's got a guy coming at you from it. But yeah, they're a much denser bunch of work. Those you get more for your money as well, even if it's 16 pages per issue. But yeah, it's not a quick read at 16 grid format. So yeah, So it's still thanks to Warren. And hopefully I've taken a little bit of that. And I did learn a little more how to write through seeing his scripts for that as well. And I recommend anyone who does want to write, look at, I know some of the issues, I'm not sure if the trade has it, some scripts in the back of it as well. But seeing his unfinished ones, I saw the stream of consciousness dialogue he initially had for some scenes that weren't finished yet, because he'd shoot me like pages and half done stuff, like hot off the press. So yeah, I cannot claim credit where credit is not due.
Well, I mean, maybe not, but I mean, it's like when I hear Dave Gibbons talk about Watchmen, yes, Alan Moore provided wonderful scripts, but if you'd have had somebody who was less talented on art trying to adapt that, it's not going to work. It's going to be boring. It's going to be difficult to read. Had every opportunity to, I mean, all pun intended, fall on its face, and it did not. It was in.
Well, that's the other thing about like creative marriages that way, is that not everyone's cut out to work with everyone. I know I would never be able to work with Alan Moore, who literally, I'm joking probably, but the gist of it is correct, I think, in that he will describe the kind of brick he wants in the third building in the background of panel 5. That to me will just suck the life out of me wanting to do a project. So I need a little room to be free and creative, which Warren was perfect at, but while dictating exactly what he wanted. But because like Alan, the best writers also have a visual sense, so they know what the hell they're doing. And then they're dictating things for a reason that makes sense. Not all writers have that. Some writers try to do that, and it hurts my soul. But I try to be professional, and I do things the way they want, unless I actively think I have to step in and say something, which is very rare. I will try to follow a script to the letter, whether or not they have a good visual sense, but are still trying to dictate what a page looks like. So, but Warren, he knows, and Alan Moore knows as well. So I think there's a lot of that within the writer-artist dynamic, maybe. And Dave's really good, obviously, anyway. And so is like Kevin O'Neill. There are certain people made to work with people like Alan Moore. And I'm not one of them. As much as I admire his work. And I have worked with his daughter, though. So, and that was fun. But, I mean, her scripts were kind of, I don't remember them being bad, like hard to work on or anything like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just watching the Cartoonist Kayfabe where they were doing the 12th issue of Watchmen, and Dave Gibbons did that reading with them, and they were asking him, like, can you get your scripts out? You know, all fanboying out on, can you get your scripts? And he was reading, like, the page and a half that was describing the opening 3 pages that have nothing on them except for, and a despotic wave of, and the only sound you hear, and it's like, oh my God, Alan. All right. All right,
Hey,
bud.
some people, you can let them do whatever they want because they earned it. But yeah, I've worked with a lot of like producer types or people that are new to comics and they don't understand. There's a lot you're writing about going on in a character's head that has no bearing on what the artist needs to draw on a page, because a comic script is a process, a piece of process. It's not meant to be read by anyone but the person working on it, and they need different information. So I like the shorter script version of that. But in saying that, you do need to know acting. An artist is also the actor in a comic. So you do want to know what the character's going through, because you have to draw expressions if you're any good, and I try. And I've been told my expressions are reasonable. And a big part of that is the dialogue as well. So the Marvel method makes no sense to me at all, where if you don't know what a character is saying, how can you draw that actor, quote unquote actor, character, doing whatever it is without knowing anything about them except like, oh, he's punching someone. But is he punching him because he's sad? Is it a happy punch? Is it a sad punch? There can be different kinds of punches. So yeah. So it all goes into the mix.
So, next thing is Shadow Play, the anthology series, and
Yeah, I don't remember. So there was a period of time when Steve and I weren't talking, but it turned out, and I was still in Australia at this point, I didn't know anything much, but Steve was having some issues with a lot of people. I thought it was just me, and it was a weight off me when I realized it wasn't just me. because I was a good boy. I don't like pissing people off or doing weird things. And to my knowledge, I hadn't done anything. But I forget if that may have no the 30 Days Clown comic that I did with Matt Fraction. That was the one where we weren't working together at that point, so we both did separate halves of a book or some weird thing with a different writer or a different artist. The Shadow Play was like a weird spin-off kind of thing from that, which I don't understand the true formation of it. I mean, you'd have to ask other people how that book came about. I just said yes to it, and I got to work with I want to say her name was Amber. She was the lady from one of the actors from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was Willow's girlfriend. She was the witch. And she had a great script, and I worked on the script, and it had an old vampire guy and a kid, and that's all I remember. That to me, I mean, and that book did all right. It was fine. It was just another one in the list. It didn't have any standouts for me, put it that way, memory-wise. So I couldn't tell you too much more about it. Oh, and the other half was Ashley Wood and a lady who I forget the name of, who used to write Witchblade, I believe, some stuff like that. And Ash's work was amazing as usual. So
That's why I was curious. I didn't know how that, you had brought up Ashley Wood earlier, and I was like, oh yeah, well, you guys did that little anthology
yeah, that
book
was at no
together.
instigation of me. That was just I was just along for the ride. So there you
What about Wormwood? Um,
go.
yeah. Let's get into Wormwood a little bit. So where did Wormwood come from?
I just created the guy in high school pretty much. He was just a character I was always gestating. So his original name was Mr. Rigor Mortis. And I think the tagline I wanted was because dead guys stay hard. But then I didn't understand how rigor mortis works, and it does go away. So he was always like a corpse guy, and the joke was, there's this guy in a dead body, and you can have fun with that. But so the initial story I was asked to do like just a couple of comic pages for a guy doing a magazine called Lo-Fi Magazine. So I figured, I can put Wormwood in there, and he, became an official sort of look and the character of him. And it's mostly just me having complete nonsensical fun and seeing how much I can get away with doing really stupid ideas. Sometimes I've even come up with the title for the book just because I thought it was funny before I came up with a story. So, and then I make the story try and match the title. Like, it only hurts when I pee. So, yeah, so that thing's been around for a long time. And then I made the choice of bringing it to IDW and having them republish that first lo-fi stuff, which was called the Taster issue, and then doing a series of miniseries with it over the years, probably one every 2 to 3 to 4 years. And I've done 5 now, but only 4 have been published in the direct market.
So the evolution of that series has been interesting to watch. That you was the art reworked, or was it just kind of the early lo-fi stuff, or did you guys just kind of straight release that as it was?
Oh, it was just released. Yeah, there was no, I don't think I've ever reworked my art, except for maybe format reasons. I've never redrawn or reworked anything. No, it was all original, straight from the pages of lo-fi. And then it's really weird because that project, that more than any other project, that is the one that is my heart and soul of just my personality and of me having fun in comics. And because it's my baby, it's the thing I created as a kid pretty much. So now it's gone through the complete history of IDW pretty much, because I forget when the first issue came out, but it was still early on with IDW. They had just started getting into licenses and things shortly after that. But it ran the full length of them becoming a giant corporate behemoth, and now whatever they are now. Yeah. So I don't know if Wormwood is still, it hasn't been around for a little while. I'm still doing him, but only for the hardcore fans. There's some weirdness there. But I've always been eternally frustrated at the success, the weird success of that book, because it's like a cult hit for me. It's always done really well. I think the initial first trade paperback has gone through, like, I always misremember, it's either 7 or 11 printings, which sounds really good, but it's actually really bad because it was a perennially sold out and they never printed enough. So when you're not paid to do something directly, but you only make money through sales, that kind of hurts. And you want them to just like, could you just double the print run for this one? It's like, this is print run 5. You probably have an idea that you're going to sell through them in the next year or two, you know. So that was a project that taught me a lot about the business side and how things work or don't work and what you do want as a creator versus a publisher who may be extremely conservative and not even want to back their own success, which is weird because the data would have dictated maybe we should just double the print run on this, which I also learned and had a contrast with, again through Fell and again through Warren, in that the initial trade of Fell had something like a print run of, I want to say it was 40,000 copies of a trade. And it took a few years to sell through them. But the financial sense was there. I mean, you got to pay for the storage maybe, yes, but they got that print run out of the way. And so everything after that was money, and it sold really well, the long tail of that. And that's what you want as a comic creator who only makes money on royalties. It did go to a second printing much more recently because they finally sold out. But yeah, I've now seen both ends of the spectrum on that. One of them is really good and one of them is really kind of shitty. So yeah, these projects teach me a lot, man. But Wormwood is definitely the one closest to my heart. But unfortunately, I don't have full sovereignty over it, shall we say.
I was going to say, can we talk a little bit about what happened with Wormwood and IDW and all of that kind of madness? Because that was messed up
Well, it
to.
might be ongoing. I'll see if I ever get an email reply. I eventually... IDW was initially 4 partners. And they gradually sold their share of the company to this guy, a billionaire named Howard Jonas, who has various companies, various shell companies within corporate structures. A big one called IDT, which is like a phone card company and stuff. But he made his billions doing pamphlets like for tourists on Broadway, for the Broadway shows. So you'd go to a hotel lobby and you'd see all this display of advertising stuff for the Broadway shows, and he was apparently publishing all of that, so made a lot of money. I shook his hand. I've shaken the hand of a billionaire, and eventually, you know, they all left the company, and this is after I signed a contract with Wormwood, you know, and this was another hard life lesson in that you can work with people and work with their company, but people can come and go and they can sell, but the company remains. And you're only signing something with the company. So flash forward, IDW has a very interesting history. They get huge with Transformers, G.I. Joe, and a bunch of stuff. And I'm kind of there and I'm tailing off and I'm like, I'm moving on to some other things because I don't necessarily want to be part of I don't want to be a cog in a machine. You know, they double, triple in size employee-wise. I don't know anyone there now. They've all gone. Everyone's left. And this is from someone that used to work in the office. So for a year, I was an exclusive with them. Yeah, and at the time, I'm like, I don't have delusions of grandeur or anything about properties becoming other media. So, and I already had a film made of one of my books. And like, that was a life-changing experience. It was very nice. I don't expect that every day anyway. But if you're going to take something that's my baby and develop it, especially in-house, which is different to someone coming in and buying it straight away and going, okay, we've bought the right to do it, so you can fuck off. A lot of that is fuck off money to keep a person happy and for them to have the right to produce something or potentially. But it was being developed in-house. So Wormwood was going to be, they wanted to do a TV show, and there was some interest from a guy named George Lopez, comedian, which was okay, you know, that's fine, see what you want to do. But I had assumed that as the sole creator of a book that I never got paid to do, but only would make money on sales. That I'd signed a contract with initial people I have a history with, who were vaguely still there. I found out, and I didn't want to be involved and like take over the damn thing or anything, but it's nice to know things as the creator of something. And I had just come off an opportunity that didn't eventually pan out, and again, it was because of Fell. Fell was going to be something in other media at some point, but that deal never ended up happening. But I may have ended up having to be the art director on an animation thing, working with some people in London. And so like, oh, that's life-changing. That's a whole new sphere and level of a career sort of thing. Still to do with my visuals, and I hadn't asked for that, but it was the offer, and it just didn't work out. That's fine. So then you come to Wormwood, and I find out via press release that the promises that I'd have some sort of involvement was I'd found out via the press release I would be a creative consultant, which is the way they just get to say your name without having to do anything, and it doesn't mean anything, and it certainly doesn't apparently mean that you ever see even the script or even get to hear the reading of the first episode with a bunch of actors. And I mean, you don't get to be in the room, and you don't even get to know that you weren't in the room. But so long as the IDW top people were there, then those are the important people. So it was a very hard life lesson to learn how little you matter sometimes in the scheme of creator rights, and how things can work in business if you don't treat it like business and stop assuming people are necessarily your friends who will look out for you. So, because I can't change what I did early on, because Wormwood was one of my first comics initially. It just has had a life since then. So yeah, I have high hopes for Wormwood in the future. We'll just see what happens. We'll see what happens. I don't know anyone there now. They've vaguely reached out to me, but I don't think they understand how much I'm annoyed.
Yeah, it didn't seem.
I mean, the comic industry is full of creators feeling jilted about their creations. This one's just a little blatant. I didn't expect much, but a basic level of respect of just knowing things. And I think the last time it came, because time had passed and they wanted me to sign more papers, they just sent me some papers in the mail to sign on again to whatever was potentially going to happen. I just conveniently forgot to, because no one, I think, wants to find out news about themselves via press release rather than hearing it from the company they're meant to be working with. So we will see. We will see. I'm now an official old veteran of comics where I've had shit happen and feel jaded sometimes. As you can see, I'm still really relatively good-natured about it. So I can create new things. So yeah. See, I don't even necessarily want it to be anything. I want it to be a comic that people enjoy, as long as people still buy comics. That's what I'm in for, first and foremost. So my real issues go back to the support of the comic initially. So as with any comic, I want comics to get into people's hands, especially if it helps me pay my rent, but for anyone in the industry. So I'm always going to be sticking up for creator rights for anyone. So, but you learn things the hard way, and I just wish you could jump a few steps ahead for other people to let them know, look, to teach them stuff that I wasn't taught, or to learn the terms of contracts and various things. And like, yeah, it's good to have a lawyer. I should have done that earlier on.
There invariably hits a point in your career where you're like, well, yeah, should have hired that lawyer about 2 years ago. In comics,
Yeah, well,
it's just
those life lessons are one of the reasons why I try to operate the way I do now, where I just do everything myself through my quote unquote fan club, because I try to treat it like a fan club, but my Patreon thing, where I create all my new books and they help pay me to create them literally, and they get special printings and stuff. And then I've got finished books which the world hopefully is my oyster. I can do what I want with them. So I have a whole bunch of properties that way now. So thanks to good people.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, let's actually get into that a little bit. I was
That
gonna,
wasn't meant to be. It was a clever segue, but it wasn't
well,
really.
no, because that's, I was actually gonna ask if you are one of the creators that I see that's on the forefront of crowdsourcing, but not necessarily in the way that I think a lot of people think about crowdsourcing in the way of like Kickstarter and Indiegogo for everything. Like your Patreon is very interactive, and they get to watch the comic being built, and they get special versions of the comics. You know, was your experience with IDW, is that what kind of spurred on that level of creative thinking when it came to doing your own stuff?
Well, it was the big part of. So creator owned doesn't necessarily. It's a bit of a fake term in comics. I think we need to move beyond creator owned comics because ownership implies control. And that's not normally the case with a lot of publishers and a lot of deals. So creator owned usually means, you think it at least means 50-50. But what that actually usually means with a lot of I'm not talking Marvel DC here, I'm talking companies that dabble with original IP that then put it out. Usually means 50.1% to the publisher because they want their people to control the media rights. And then the publisher will generally also control the print runs and the various aspects like what I just talked about with reprints and stuff like that, which really impact royalties. If you know a book is selling, but they never print enough, it's a weird situation to be in. But that sort of stuff matters to the actual person who created the book and is then trying to make a living based on sales of and success of that property. So you kind of want some say in that. And that's happened at various companies. And most companies have a similar deal where they want a piece. And for that, you either get an advance or you get it in the direct market, especially. But I figured that like I can kind of bypass that at least and do the comic myself and at least so that I can have a fully formed thing ready to do whatever I want with, or take it to wherever I potentially want, but with a little more bargaining power. And that's not even crowdfunding, the crowdfunding aspect yet. Although Patreon is like a mini Kickstarter, I guess. And I have dabbled in Kickstarters before, and that ended terribly, not because of me, but because of an ex-business partner who decided to spend most of the money before the things were finished, which is another hard life lesson. I'm coming across, I hope I'm not really sounding terribly jaded. These are life lessons you learn and they change you. So, but the Patreon, I treat it like a fan club. I don't see many people. Yes, people show the process work and that's great and they bring them along. But the fan club aspect of it comes in as like, I want to give people a full object. I'm only in the comics. I mean, I acknowledge digital is useful, which is weird because I do work digitally half the time. But I'm in it for the objects and for the pieces of paper the issues, well, the hardcovers especially. But that's why I create things. So I want to give those to the people that really appreciate them. So the whole reason I do those things is so I can make special little limited runs and give them to people. Well, people that have paid me a certain amount of money each month who then get a copy. But I realized early on that comics, yes, it's about storytelling and it's about, whatnot, but it's really since we've had to compete with games, obviously movies, and all the new rising things, right? The last thing we have going for us is what we sell as an experience. So the trick is to sell an experience as good as possible. And part of that is through the art, part of that is through the storytelling and how a creative work can make you feel. But there's all the other extra stuff around that. So I give people things in like wax sealed packs with extra signed stuff and all sorts of things, because they're the special ones. And I think every kid growing up got into comics because they had an amazing experience to begin with that changed their life in some way, and they stuck with it. That doesn't happen for a lot of media. I mean, some games do that, some movies do that, but not all of them. So you want to try and hit the right note. And if you can do that, then I think 1,000 years from now, if people still read anything on paper, then you can give someone an experience that they can't get digitally or something like that. So that's what I aim for. Am I ranting right now? I just went off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, that was absolutely.
That's the ethos that drives me. So
it. I have struggled for years to try to explain for me, a big part of needing a physical copy is reading digital. The way dyslexia works is left and right don't work for me, and I also happen to be dysgraphic, which means up and down don't work for me. So things literally move, they float around digitally on a page using my mouse, which is just counterintuitive anyway for me. It's like riding a roller coaster. It's awful.
apparently the brain also works differently when it comes to digital versus in real world. Like your memories are formed differently. So when I write, I usually write by hand first, because that is more concrete and there's a memory there. It's the same with my original art. Everything is still physical. And I remember most of the things about what I was doing when I was doing it, who I was doing it for, because it's a real object. So, and like with comics, you get that smell of the printed page sometimes, especially, and that gives you another memory, so those experiences are all very important. And digital is just a little, I don't know, if you put my entire life on a hard drive, it wouldn't mean much compared to the tangible attic filled with my crap. But no one wants that anyway. So, but yeah, there's a lot to be said for the real physical world, real world objects. So
absolutely. And if you ever need to clean out all that, pesky art up in your attic, dude, I'll send you my address.
I don't have too much,
worries.
man. I'm sorry. And I moved so much, so I have a bunch, but a lot of that stuff is the stuff I'm keeping now. But I do sell a lot of my art. So
I was gonna say, can we talk a little bit about your artistic process? I know that you said you were an early proponent in Photoshop, and yet I know that you also predominantly work, at least in the early stages, with physical media. Can you talk about why you started working digitally and how you incorporate that with your physical media?
Well, back in, what was it? I guess the 90s. So like Dave McKean was probably the first guy to outside of Malibu revolutionizing the way comics are colored, potentially. Okay, leaving that aside, because that's just normal traditional comics. So that was a big breakthrough. Yes. But you had a guy named Dave McKean doing Sandman covers and then a whole bunch of other stuff. And he realized there was this program called Photoshop with it was meant to be a photo retouching app program. And he was using it to adjust and distort and augment his art. And then because he had put that tool into his process, he knew what he was going to do on the physical side before he did it digitally. And then he could take it back and do more to it and then put it through the digital again with scanning it. So when I realized you could do all that weird, crazy shit that way, and then Ashley Wood, I saw his early work on some Spawn work. There wasn't Hellspawn. It was some these two other prestige things called Spawn, Blood, and Salvation, I think. I always mess up the names, but they were two like big one shots. I believe both were written by Paul Jenkins, but they were great because he showed that he was doing some basic real world stuff and then feeding into the computer as well and taking it out again and then painting over it again and doing all these weird mixed media things. It was really cool. And no one else was doing anything like that. Everything else was straight line work and then colored between within the lines, either by computer or the very old traditional way. So I tried to just harness that because I have a design degree. I got exposed to Photoshop, getting my degree in my early 20s. So I got my computer, got my scanner, and got Photoshop and thought, how can I approach the process? So all my work is still just hand drawn, but then I tend to tone it up and paint it up with watercolor or ink wash and stuff. But then it's usually grayscale, and I feed it into a scanner, and then I tweak things. I might add layers and textures and things, and colorize it in a weird way that I still only use a mouse for. So I don't draw on computer. I simply use it as a bit of a tool. I do have a tablet, but I've not once broken it out because the world's changed now, and half the people only draw on computer. But my reckoning is I'll only want to use the computer for something I can't already do in the real world because I want that tangible piece of art. That's a piece of my history right there. To reduce it to a computer file, it's like, well, it's just not the same. And also the dynamics of the economics of the original art means you don't have a piece of art to sell. So you have no further long tail economics of a piece of work you've done, which makes even less sense if that book goes on to be something pretty good, or it's for a giant corporation where you don't really share in the success of whatever the work ends up having to be, but at least you would keep that original piece of artwork for posterity or to sell to someone who it means even more to, you know? So yeah, I'll always work that way. And honestly, I don't do anything particularly fancy. There are a lot more skilled artists now who do things on computer that look amazing. I may dabble with that and see how I can adjust what I do physically to then using an actual digital pen or something. But I would still only use it as about like the last 20% of whatever I'm doing, rather than doing everything on computer. So now I still use a mouse. I, at one point, was one of the early adopters, I guess. And then I just stopped and never progressed. So now I'm very old. I'm a very old man when it comes to technology. I use Photoshop and a mouse, and that's it. But I do letter myself, and I do use the computer, and I still don't even do that in a traditional way. I hand draw my balloons and then just layer them. So yeah, I have workarounds that probably make my life much more difficult than it needs to be, because I'm just not bothered to learn any new techniques, because what I do already works for me, and I don't mind a bit of work. So yeah, I'm a traditional, almost, kind of.
You're a hybrid.
At least for the 90s, I'm traditional. I'm a 90s traditionalist.
You're a hybrid in so many interesting ways, because I wondered about how much I've seen a lot of your line work, you know, your grayscale stuff. I'm especially into black and white, and I love looking at original art. It's like learning about what's going on behind the scenes of my favorite comics. I love seeing all those mistakes and stuff. And when I was looking at it, I was like, man, I don't really see where this is digital art. Why am I always reading about him being a digital artist? And then
well, the final print files they get printed on paper. Yeah, they usually get some tweaks in computer, at least tweaks, if not, you know, full colorizing and adding glowing effects and various things. But the one weird thing is that for the first time, I think I might have done it once before many years ago, I have to, for the first time, do a pen and ink drawing, like traditionally, that I know will be colored by someone else, because I have to do a part of a combo piece where a lot of the artists still work in the traditional process of, well, I do the pencils, then I do the inks, and then someone colors me. So I have to fit in with that, which will be a trip. So I'll have to act like I'm a vaguely like the rest of the professional comic industry. So, and see what the effect will be. That'll be fun. That'll be a challenge. Because for me, I only approach the drawing knowing usually in advance in my head how I'm going to approach either adding paint to it or how it'll look in computer when I do a few things to it. But if I know I'm only going to do the pencil and inking, then it's a whole different mind process of making it look good just at that stage, which is kind of more work at this point I try to explain that to people at comic shows where they're, oh, can I just get a quick sketch of that? It's like, well, that's actually more work than if you let me do my normal process. I'm not trying to rip people off, but I'd want to charge more for less. But it's not less in my brain. It's a lot more mental work. It's just the way it is. Yeah.
Hey man, can't argue with the working process.
You really can't.
I can see how, like, working especially with, like, you know, paint and watercolors and that kind of stuff like you do, how that would be a huge constraint. Just, well, boil it down to, you know, 18 lines. Okay, I'm not sure. Are we looking at the same art, guys? Because that doesn't really work here.
Well, you do get masters who, well, reduction in, like, Mike Mignola is the best at that. So that, and and his art's amazing. So, but there's so much complexity in what you don't see in his work, and people like that's still so much more work. So then overly rendering something, shall we say? I mean, overly rendering something can look cool as hell, but it can actually be more mindless work and easy work than trying to do something only in 2 or 3 lines.
Oh,
which will take more mint. Yeah, it's weird.
Look at Alex.
But that's art, man.
You know, look at Alex Toth. you know,
Yeah.
that's there's Toth and Magnola and a couple other guys that you can point to, but they have got probably the most simplistic style that you'll. Mazzucchelli is another one of those guys that you saw, you know, and often imitated, very rarely approached, because yeah, good luck boiling down stuff to 8 lines. I mean, it is a fine science to itself. Um, so let me see what
Have I commit
okay.
career suicide enough yet?
No, oh, no, 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 no.
I
There's
don't mind for any of this to be public. It's fine. It's like I want. Uh, I like your interviews and I like the way you approach them because they're in depth and they're like, you know, no one's giving you just PR bullshit. It's like this is really what happened, or this is how the creator feels about their life's work, and yeah. So yeah. Ask away. Let's get more controversial.
let's
Can
talk a
we?
little bit about, you know, Steve Niles and
Mhm.
all of that. There was a period, like as you said, he was having some difficulties with people in his life. You guys, I know, have done some work since then. Is that patched?
Yeah. I was living in Australia at the time, so I only really heard about it and got a few, I guess, angry messages and angry things getting back to me, hearing about things. So I'd never had a disagreement with anyone in my life, so it affected me more than it obviously would now. But I wasn't told anything from anyone else in the sphere of what's happening. So when you're all alone in the middle of Australia, not knowing anything, you only believe the worst ideas in your head anyway. So I know he had some troubles. I'm not about to. I can't talk about them because I don't really know. It's whatever's out there publicly is whatever was public. But for what I just decided to be out. I'm like, you do you. I'm out for a while. But I think we've since reconciled, and he's got a great life and enjoying himself now in many ways. And I wish him well. And I never bared him any ill will. I just didn't know how to deal with any of that stuff. So there was a period of time we didn't obviously work together, and I guess we weren't speaking, but the publisher still wanted stuff out of us. So they figured workarounds and things. So there was never any feud, not on my end or anything like that. I just, no, I wish him well. I mean, I'd be open to doing something with him if he wants in the future. But I know he's off doing other things now too. So yeah, more power to him. So we will see. I haven't seen him in a few years, but then I haven't seen a lot of people in a few years. That's just because of the nature of conventions and travel. But I have seen him. Well, I mean, the last time I saw him was very nice. No, it was very cool. But yeah, that's all him. You could talk to him about any of that because honestly don't know the full story. I just know I was on the end of a small, very small part of it.
I'm glad you were insulated. I was just curious about what had gotten back
Well,
to him.
insulated is the wrong word. Isolated. When you're thousands of miles away, and yeah, and you don't know anything.
And I do have to ask, you know, I know you said you were still in touch with Warren, and
Vaguely, yes,
I
vaguely.
I I I think highly of his work. You know, I can't speak to what's going on with him is
I
just
don't think I don't think any normal person is going to agree with a particular lifestyle of. Well, what? See, I've hung out with Tommy Lee of Motley Crue vaguely. I've had a weird life because of 30 Days. So I've seen rock stars do rock star things slightly, and with groupies, and so I'm not saying those particular people in question were groupies, but I'm saying rock star behavior is called rock star behavior for a reason, And Warren was and is, he had a persona and he was a rock star of comics in many ways. So, you know, he's got to deal with the issues that came from that, of acting that way. But no one is perfect. Everyone has weird shit happen in their personal lives, but basically treat people decently. And if you fuck up, apologize. But I don't know how you fix his situation. So I don't know if that was your question, but
no
obviously
no
I do not condone people doing. No, but I also believe in redemption and some sort of level of forgiveness. only because I don't throw people under the bus. I won't change overnight. I mean, outside of criminal charges for something, like if you go and murder someone, I may, but even then, people still support people, even if they've done horrible crimes. I'm not sure I'd get to that point. That's a moral conversation. It's a philosophical conversation. But he's a big one in comics, and I think comics need some of their most creative, successful people to still be around for the sake of the medium. But that's very different from dealing with a one-on-one personal situation someone has. So I just want to finish a comic.
That was
one day, but only if he's allowed to.
I was gonna say that was my question. I know it's through Image. Is that Image Central? Do they have a stock or own any part of Fell, or can you guys do that on
Well,
your own? Or
the beautiful thing with Image is I believe they don't own anything. I mean, they own the
technically they don't, but through Image Central, there are a lot of people who have run into red tape with trying to move their stuff to other places, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be politics with publishers, regardless. But I mean, Image is always still going to be the best deal in town, and I have always and probably always will take my cues from what he wants to do, because he's the boss on that, and I appreciate that, and he's never treated me wrong on that. So I actually got 60% of the royalties of the single issues when the book came out, and that was at his behest, because he realized it takes you a lot longer to draw this stuff than me to write it, technically, even though it was hard for him to write sometimes. So yeah, he's had my interest, and his agent and various people I've understood what it is when a creative person is actually respected vaguely enough to go, oh, okay, we want to actually be decent people to you. So, I mean, I'm never going to say, oh, we should do it somewhere else. And he's who he is. He's obviously not doing terribly much wrong. I can't speak for Warren. Let's put that out there. But I don't think he's the sort of person to suddenly go, well, fuck everyone, I'll just do it myself. Here's a Kickstarter for it, or something like that, where he just thumbs his nose at what people think of him. Because I do believe he would prefer people to not regard him as just an asshole who just said, well, fuck you all, and I'm going to do it anyway, because people would buy it. We know that there's a lot of people that, and that's another philosophical argument, the work matters more to a lot of people than the particular character traits of a person that created something. So I don't know what the question was, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere until he's rectified his particular issues, shall we say, until the world is ready. Or the certain people that he certainly impacted agree to that. We'll see. I'm just a cog in this thing, man.
That was my question. I just didn't know. I know he's made it. My take on the situation is he is trying his best to rectify the situation as well as he can, and I respect that. And I just didn't know if you guys had any plans with the books outside of Image, and it's kind of cool to hear that it'll be at Image when and if
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question.
Ready.
It hasn't been posed to me. If it was up to me, I'd probably say no, purely because, well, one, there was an agreement, and Image have always been the home, and I still like Image. What was I going to say? Well, like, you can thumb your nose at the world and ostracize a lot of people by doing that, and I don't want to do that, because I just want to be everyone's friend, and I want to just do good comics. So, and I don't think he's that sort of person. So, which does speak to some goodness about him. And I only ever want to check on him to make sure he's okay, or doing vaguely okay. Because I do believe even at your darkest hour, you deserve a little. You need, to have everyone desert you is a horrible thing. So, but I don't think he's wanting to desert the comic industry and just do his own thing, because he still could. But yeah, and I think that speaks to his character as well. So, at least a little in the affirmative, in that he's not willing to suddenly say throw in. The one weird thing with the culture wars, shall we say, that go on right now is I had people asking me to get Warren to join Comicsgate, the Comicsgate crew. Now, you can say whatever you want about Comicsgate. positive or negative. I'm not taking a side, but he's obviously not doing that. So, because he's not after a quick buck, he's a human being who obviously wants to make things right or try to. So, yeah. I don't know if this should be in the interview, but this is between you and me. But like, if you want it to be in the interview, I don't think I've said anything bad for him, but I can't speak for him or to whatever the situation is. I'm not up to date on it. Obviously, I'm not part of it. So I merely provide flowery, colorful commentary.
My main question was, whether it had at least if it had even been posited as being going somewhere else, because I think that really could be concerted as a
it would be very going against the grain of an awful lot of things.
yeah. So it says a lot, I think, that has not been posited. And as I said, I respect Warren's output a lot. Growing up in the time period I did, I'm not gonna lie, every single person that basically I respected that is in the media industry has been outed as a sociopathic or psychosexual individual of some sort. I watched Ren and Stimpy, John Chris Falusi. Okay, let's watch a guy groom 13-year-old girls for 10 years.
Wait,
Everybody
what?
was. Oh,
I didn't know. Okay.
you don't know about John
See,
Chris
that stuff's
Falusi?
technically illegal. That's like the heavy stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there are real guys. John Lasseter, the guy who ran Pixar.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I heard about him. Yeah.
okay, yeah, the bodyguards to protect little girls from him. Like, yeah, no, and there are very open things like John Kay. He groomed a girl, joked about it, and then even in his art, like when he was on the Howard Stern show, he was like drawing a picture for Howard Stern or whatever, and like he's like, oh yeah, look at her cans and blah 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 blah, and she's underage. Like even on television, he felt the need to throw this crap in.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, we're all little creative people are weird to begin with, but when you mix in some success and some ego, and we've all got a healthy ego, hopefully, at least a little. We need that, but there's sometimes it gets a little too far, and when you give people a little power, it can go badly. Not everyone's like that, but it turns out a lot of people are pretty easily corruptible or give in to like, well, I can do this, so why won't I? It sucks.
Yeah, no, I just meant that like I've had to spend a large part of my adult life separating creators from their creations.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I like about the digital age is that there are now ways for me to partake in things that I enjoy without them monetarily benefiting from that anymore.
Yes. Yes. No, yeah, it's I forget what I was going to say, damn it. It was something nice and philosophical about all that. But yeah. No, I mean, we all have, if you've never done anything wrong in your life, then you've never really lived. And the only way you learn is from fucking up. But there's fucking up and then there's fucking up. So some things require a little more attention than others. So, and we're not allowed, all our heroes are found out to be flawed now. And hopefully that's a good life lesson for us, that you can have a hero, but don't idolize them in such a way that it, yeah, I mean, that's religion at that point. So don't worship people.
It gets dangerous on every level, because that's the most important thing I've taken away from the 2 years I spent doing this Sam Keith documentary is like, why is Sam, because he's always been a self-deprecating guy and quiet and like that kind of thing. What happened to him that is so secluded and reclusive now and like angry at his own creation, and like getting to see him as a person and figuring out why he can't interact with people, being at the height of that image revolution and people putting him on that pedestal and being afraid of falling off of that pedestal and what happens, and like watching his peers. That's horrific and a terrible thing to put on people. And it's made me completely reevaluate my standpoint as like a fan and just respect the historical angle that I try to come at stuff now.
Yeah, because people are incredibly complicated, and mostly we only view the things from afar. So the fact you're even doing any of this to figure things out is amazing. But like I was incredibly shy growing up, and my parents at one point thought I was autistic on a level of autism that was noticeable just because I was shy. And hopefully I'm not terribly autistic, but I'm just shy. But getting into comics and getting into the career and then even doing conventions and stuff taught me how to socialize vaguely and acknowledge conversation and not be terribly shy, because those people were already there for me. So the ice had already been broken. So it was an incredible life change for me that taught me an awful lot, hopefully. I mean, and I'm still shy. If I don't know someone and I have to go up to them, fuck that. But if they come to me, then I say, oh yeah, because I understand hopefully what it's like to be shy, and then give that shy person the experience that without them having to do too much work, and take the fear out of it for them, maybe. So that's another reason I do shows, and I want to give people an experience like that, because I know what it would be like on the other end. But yeah, and I still get, I get anxiety attacks sometimes, which have probably fucked my career up sometimes. Get overwhelmed a little bit sometimes, but yeah, I don't think I have some of the larger issues that I think some people deal with, which I'm very thankful for.
So hopping back into the career a little bit,
I still have one.
Oh yeah, hey man. I mean,
maybe not after this. Let's see.
I'm not done grilling you yet. You got Wasteland. Was
yeah.
I was gonna say I really enjoyed Wasteland. You want to talk just a little bit about like how Wasteland came to happen?
I'll tell you, man. So Anthony Johnson, is it Anthony or Anthony? I always forget if he has an H in there and how he prefers it. Sorry, Anthony. We met on the Warren Ellis forum pretty much, and he was pretty much the first guy I ever did a comic with. It was an online choose your own adventure kind of thing, and it was called After Days of Passion. I don't remember much else about it. I don't think it's online anymore. It was sort of little choose your own adventure type little sort of idea of a comic, and kept in touch. There was no money involved in that. That was just a fun thing to do certainly before I was published anyway. But I'm going to get the chronology probably wrong, but he now is a computer game industry writer. He literally writes games a lot of the time. So one of his earlier ones, and probably weighs into that, was early on we did the Dead Space comic. He was the writer on it, on this really amazing marketing job, which was turned into a comic, but using a marketing budget, not comic book budget. So we worked on that as a legit comic. And I think after that, he created and wrote Wasteland with Chris Mitten. And because we had that sort of working relationship already, and I just like helping people out, turns out, I said, yeah, I'll do some covers for you. So I think I did all up 30 something covers just for free, just for a friend. So all of those some of them weren't my best work because they were pretty rushed with deadlines, because it was just a quick thing. I had a free thing I was doing on the side. It wasn't like my legit work, but yeah, they were all done for free, and they were just done for my friend. And that's the story of the Wasteland covers. I never did interiors because, yeah.
I knew you'd never done interiors. You've become prolific as a cover artist, and actually, that's kind of
bit, which is weird considering the quality of my work. Okay. You have to let me get my little snide digs in it myself. So,
and you have to
appreciation is important,
and you have to let me sit here and shake my head at you, because I'd kill, man. I tried to make it and got tremors. Hands.
Well, I think every artist wishes they could have an entire week to do one image or more. But in commercial art, you get the time you're given, and you have other deadlines. It's freelance, so everything's the product of its time, really. But I try my best, obviously, on most things.
That's one of the things I respect most about you guys when I speak to you. It doesn't matter about your level of interest or anything like that. And it goes back to what I was talking about with commissions and you being able to tackle anything that's put in front of you. And Jim Valentino put it as, well, I'm a professional. So, you ask a professional to do something, you'd kind of do it. And I was like, yeah, leave it to Jim Valentino to sum it up and punch me in the face with it. That about sums it up.
Yeah, he's always been good to me. And I enjoyed your interview with him too. So it's like, he's a guy people should learn from, because he has a lot of history there, and he's done it all. So
God, Jim changed my life, man. Before I knew I had social anxiety disorder, I was at a show and I literally was in line to see Todd McFarlane. It was in Chicago. It was the first ever show I'd been to, and I didn't know what it was at the time, but I had like a freak out panic attack and I was running out of the line and I guess I went the wrong way. Went right behind the table and just ran into this granite rock that turned out to be Jim Valentino. He like sat me down and got me a drink and
Oh,
he's like, dude, are you okay? And I think he knew more of what was going on than I did at that time. And I like behind me, I like in a box, I have a stack of books. And he went and he marched over to Todd McFarlane's table and he slammed a book down and he pointed over at me and see Todd signing. He goes over to Jim Lee and comes back with a stack of books. It's one of those moments that you were talking about that people have with comics that
yep.
changes you, that's not like other mediums. And that
Yeah.
is one of the things that has really been absolutely incredible with this channel, getting to speak to people like you and Jim.
Much more Jim, let's be honest. But yeah.
Man, I respect the hell out of your work. You're
Well,
prolific.
thanks.
You've worked on some of the most bitingly original horror out there. And I'm a big horror fan, but I hate most horror because
I do too. That's me.
it's
I think most horror misses the mark generally.
and
Like,
it's derivative.
well, I mean, the stories are the stories. I can't comment because I'm not a great writer myself, but stylistically, art wise, you've got to make things distinct because horror is its own. You've got to give the things a vibe. I mean, art is emotion on paper. So, I mean, there's always different art for different things. You can have art that juxtaposes against the nature of what you're actually seeing in the work that really works well. But generally, you shouldn't have a horror comic look like a romance comic, and you shouldn't have a romance comic look like a horror comic, although they could also work. But yeah, art is integral to a horror comic, potentially, and depending on the nature of the horror. So I'm just disagreeing with myself right now. But yeah, no, I get what you mean. I want to see more proper horror art in horror comics, let's be honest. So
That I will agree with. I think the stories are making a very interesting move in the correct direction with like the more mainstream with the I think with what is it? Something is killing the children and House of Slaughter, seeing that level of mainstream, you can tell they're like, well, how do we make a superhero book that's horror that's not and when that's happening, it's reaching a level of cultural proliferation that we haven't seen in probably 30 years. And that was when, the Warren Mags and all of that stuff were at the height of their power. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I think you've been extraordinarily pivotal in that movement because you have stuff like your Doctor Who, like that, the Whispering Gallery.
oh yeah, the thing I did with Liam Moore. Yeah, that was the main thing. Yeah. I'll never do that again. Likenesses are a lot of work, and that was just a lot of work. And it's a licensed property too, so it's not like it's for huge money and you get it's the work of your life. I did it because I had to cajole them into letting me do anything related to Doctor Who, and I got them to get Leah on. I suggested that. So I was. It sounds egotistical, but I'm very happy that I staked my claim that little book happened because of me, because I was literally working in the offices at the time and had to explain to them, you just bought the Doctor Who license. Wow. I grew up with that growing up. Everyone outside of America did in the Anglo English speaking world, pretty much. And yeah, in America, I know it was on PBS. But so they didn't really understand that they had people right there who wanted to do this stuff, who knew this stuff already. So I had to convince them. And then we did the Whispering Gallery, which was a lot of work, but I did it for love. So, but no more, because that was a lot of work. So you do that once and then you're like, I've done that now. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And I got my little, I can die happy because there's a screen grab somewhere of David Tennant holding up a copy of the book with my cover. So I'm like, oh yes, achievement unlocked. I'm done. So.
I grew up as a massive Doctor Who fan, so I was curious, like how you
And you're
got hooked.
American, right? So you know that, and it's much rarer in this country to know the classic, Tom Baker stuff and all of that. So Or do you mean when it came back again, the reboot?
Oh no, 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 no. Most people
Yeah,
are
you're
like,
proper.
most people are like, oh, you love Tom Baker, PBS, and I'm like, yeah, no, Patrick Troughton is my doctor, thank you. So,
Really? Okay. I only came on with John Pertwee. So
oh,
I mean, I know,
John, yes.
yeah. So that was my beginning of my cultural awareness. So see, I have some credibility, but yeah, no, that was going a little further back. I think I came in on like the transition episode. So I didn't really get exposed to Troughton too much. So
I grew up around a record shop, and they also had VHS in the back, and I remember like, oh, what's this? Doctor Who popping it in, and just mind blown. It's like I'm going to devour this series. 10 grand. 10 grand was another one that I was going to ask you
oh
about.
yeah.
Would you like to talk a little bit about 10 grand?
Uh Look, I said yes to. I was going through a lot of life changes at the time. Um the one thing I say about the book, I mean, it was all perfectly fine. Um, I liked my work on it generally. I thought the story was okay. It's a heaven and hell thing, deal with the devil type, classic. Um, yeah, the only polite thing I say about that is like I've worked with many people in comics, but I've only ever worked for one person, and so that felt like that was what the relationship was with Mr. Stasinski. So, and I was going through a lot of life stuff, so I didn't finish the book. Someone else took over, which was exactly his call, and that's fine. So it was just a work for hire thing for me too. But it was nice. It was nice. But you very much got the sense, or I did, that I was just a cog in the machine, which wasn't pleasant. But I don't know. There's nothing else extra to add, I guess, except that I got a first Bill Sienkiewicz variant cover on a book I did, which was good for me. So that made my day, my career. Yeah.
You can die a happy man. You get Bill Sienkiewicz on a book, man. Oh, God, I love that guy.
Well, I didn't get him on it, but he did the cover of it. So yeah.
I mean, you've had Sam Keith and Bill Sienkiewicz on your books doing variant
I
covers.
should say Bill is the other strategically pivotal influence that I didn't even know. Like, so if Ashley Wood is my godfather, he is my god grandfather, artistically speaking. Because I know Ash and looked at Bill's work early on too. So we're all part of that. If the genetic life branches of the tree of life of art, we're on that branch, and he is the root, or one of the roots of that branch. So
Interesting.
just a little tiny nub now. Well, because he's mixed media, and he, once he found his own voice, the man is a genius. So, and he's kind of got a chemist. He knows a lot about chemistry too, which he uses in his materials for his art, which I cannot fathom, but it's a marvel to watch. So, and he's a guy that's lived some life and has huge history in comics. So if you could ever do a thing on him, man, I'm pretty sure he'd do it. He is a super nice guy with a glint in his eye. That he'll murder you if you do something. He's very passionate, so don't cross him. he told me that once. He's like, but if you do me wrong, I'll kill you, sort of thing, with a little glint in his eye. No, which is the contrast, because he's such a nice, affable, genuine person. I'm not trying to get in trouble, Bill. I'm sorry. Love you. No, he would be. I think many people would be fascinated by a retrospective and whatnot on him. And that man has done so much.
I grew up on Sienkiewicz, and I remember watching him on New Mutants and watching that evolution take place, and then him coming back to Moon Knight. And right around that period was when I found Hunter S. Thompson, and thereby found Ralph Steadman.
Yep, Ralph Steadman's not one of my early ones, so mostly because of the ads in the back of a Playboy for vodka. He did some vodka ads. It was weird. But what was I going to say? Oh no! So my first exposure to Bill, which was kind of formative, was Stray Toasters, and I guess for Dave McKean was also his Cages book. So not just Sandman covers, and not just the Marvel stuff that Bill's known for either. So yeah, I came about in a roundabout way. So I missed him the first time, and then once I realized the influences of the people I was influenced by, that's when I fully started to appreciate Bill. And I hadn't even, and then I met him and all bets were off. I was like, oh, you're actually a super nice guy too, super talented. So damn him.
Thank God he quit smoking. I remember when I met him, he was like the nicest guy. I only got to talk to him for like 2 minutes at a show, but he was like like vibrating with energy, and I was like,
Well, I
holy.
think when he was doing a little stuff for the little company I formed one time, because he collaborated on a project for some stuff. One of the people we had with us, he had to go and get him coffee. And I think, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but something like 11 espresso shots in a cup. Like the man likes to juice himself up a little, because I think that would kill me. I do Red Bull, but yeah. But you can see that in the nature of his art as well, and how someone's mind work is often how it comes out on the page. And he's extremely frenetic, extremely passionate, extremely colorful. Just has a way, and if you'd meet him, it suits his personality as well, I think. So, like many artists have portrayed from their work, you can kind of, oh yeah, you meet them and that makes sense now. Yeah. If you saw how messy my studio was, you'd completely understand my art. Yes.
I was going to say, getting to talk to you does explain a lot of stuff about the fluidity in your mind thought process when it
Oh,
comes
really?
to
Oh,
putting
good.
stuff on paper. No, it really does. It's very interesting whenever I get to talk to an artist and how they conceptualize and think about art and how you use digital technology, because that was something that I heard tossed around a lot with your name, but no one ever used specifics because no one bothers, why ask? We know he uses
It's so
Photoshop,
weird.
so.
Like, this is nothing against you, but like, it's funny that I literally run a fan club where I show every page and the process of every page that I do that way. So it's not like, okay, it is paywalled technically, but I do show a little elsewhere. But like, I'm doing it every day. And it's like, you can know, I'm not keeping it a secret. You just have to join the club. So, but yeah, because there's a lot of misconceptions on, well, you have to still explain to people sitting next to you in the seat on the airplane that there are different people that draw it or write it, or people don't understand a lot of things about comics. It's not that complicated. But yeah, the art side, yeah. If I lose my scanner, which I've had for like over a decade, but the scanner itself was like 20 years old, if that dies, I'm screwed. So I'll have to use a tablet then. So.
And we were talking about Bill Sienkiewicz, and whenever I think about him, I think about Hendrix and his graphic novel, which reminds me of Voodoo Child, which I actually really enjoyed.
There's no real story on that one. That one was just, most of my stories involve, oh, I got an email from someone asked me to do something. I'm like, I said yes. That one was like, it was weird. The one weird good thing, this is not me trying to be too cool for school. It's just how life goes, right? So you have a movie made out of your first comic, virtually your first comic book, finished comic book. Went to the set a couple times, got along with everyone really well, got to go to the premiere and all that. You have life-changing situations. Like, if you think that that's normal, then you're fucked. And maybe I lost myself a little bit with an ego for a little bit just when that was all happening, because everyone thinks they're hot shit. But so I've met, and in the course of my career and people being fans of my work, I've been invited to backstage a rock show. That's just the whole story. But the thing is, you meet people and you get these life experiences. So they were trying to, it was Virgin Comics, I think it was. And of course I said yes, because it was an interesting job and some work. But they were drummers like, oh, it's Nick Cage doing a thing. It's like, well, I don't hate Nick Cage. Quite like his work now. He's certainly got a resurgence now. But like, I had no ambition to, because someone's name is attached to something, to go, oh, well, I have to do it now. The same way as saying, oh, we want to turn this into a movie. I'm like, oh, really? Well, obviously I'd like some money. And obviously there could be an interesting process there, but it's not like, oh, I will sell my soul for just because someone's talking something up. So I just do things because they're either creatively interesting or whatever. So yeah, he was working, I believe, he wrote that with his son, or who then went on to have some controversy of his own in comics. But yeah, I never met him. I never did more than just doing a cover or two for one of their books, which was fun. It's like I'm apologizing if it means more to you than it did to me, because to me it was just one of those little projects that came along in the 20 something years I guess I've done now. So, but if it had more impact for you, then good. I hope you liked the covers. But yeah, there's no real story to tell.
No, I did.
Except
I
booked it
really
up like
enjoyed
that.
the covers, but I also thought it was interesting. Nick Cage is one of the very few actors who's, before it was cool to like comics, he liked comics. There is no arguing that that guy.
I am a fan of him now, but like back then, it was like, oh, I'm going to do this because some guy is attached to it name,
I was just
which is
curious.
the one other project that you may have missed. I don't know if you've missed it, but I did a book recently called Fish Kill.
Oh, no, I was going to get to there, but
Oh, okay.
let's go.
Well, I
No,
just
no, no,
segued
no.
into like I worked with a guy who's actually one of the actors on The Walking Dead, Dan Fogler, because he genuinely likes comics and he's written a bunch of comics before too. So it's like, yeah, you don't impress me with your movie credentials. You impress me by loving comics. So, legit.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Groom
Don't
Lake.
die. Not yet. I still need you.
No one needs me.
I need to finish this interview. Goddammit. I'm not trying to wrap it up either. Just
I was gonna say, I swear to God, I'm almost there. I swear we've only got like, because Groom Lake and Gotham by Midnight were the other two that I did want to talk about. And I don't know if there's any or no story behind Groom Lake.
well, Grimlake was because Chris Ryle. I think I've never asked him. I need to ask how you actually pronounce his name because some people say Rael or Rael. I say Ryle. I just slur it all together. Hope it doesn't insult him. No, he's a super good guy. He was the editor in chief for a long time. Then he left and came back, but this was well before that. Because he wants to write too. He's a creator. He's a creative person, and he's one of those few people in comics who, when they have some power, in a management sort of position, but they don't lose themselves and they're not complete assholes. He's actually a genuinely nice person. So like he looks out for creative people. I really appreciate that about him. So we obviously got along like a house on fire for a while. I mean, to this day, hopefully. So I think he pitched me this idea, or I don't think I suggested it to him, and he wanted to do this sort of like X-Files-y type thing, but he wanted to make it a little more, I think he was erring on the side of making it a little more serious, which I said, that's going to be a tough thing to do, man. You should, because it has potential to fall flat a lot more. But it was during a period of time when that just didn't feel like the right vibe. But I was also coming off doing stupid stuff that was more amusingly funny and tongue-in-cheek, but also still dark, like the Wormwood stuff. So if you wanted like me on the book, it's like you got to make it kind of a little more that. So, you've got to have like giant amoebas eating poodles from space or something. Stupid stuff. And then he did, and he ran with it, and it was a nice little miniseries. I think he wants to do more at some point, which I won't say no to. It was just a period of my life that I'd left behind that I'd have to revisit that whole property type thing and get back in the vibe. But yeah, it was a fun little book.
I thought it was a nice change of pace for you in a lot of ways. I mean, it does kind of like still feel like you, but like you said, I think you were coming off of stuff that was kind of more silly and tongue in cheek and a little bit out there. And I really enjoyed the juxtaposition of it was probably your mindset going into that book,
It was a chain smoking alien grey, so it was still in my wheelhouse. So, and I thought that would have had some legs as well. So, and obviously I think Chris thinks it's still got some legs too. So we will see.
I'm pleasantly excited to hear that he wants to continue it, because I was actually going to ask about that. I didn't know what was going on.
Well, I'm not
with that
saying
at all.
there's firm plans or anything. I'm saying he suggested a couple times. And I'm like, well,
potential,
Oh, there's always potential. I'm not saying no. I'm just not saying anything's happening right now. What was the other book?
Gotham by Midnight. Yes.
I'm not sure how that all happened overall, but I knew Ray Fawkes, which makes it sound like he's dead, but I still know him, I think. I think he was responsible for getting me in on that book, because it's weird. I don't have much history with the big two superhero corporate kind of giants, but I do end really with DC in the end. Like my first book was going to be with DC through Vertigo, but never saw print, locked away somewhere. I went on to do what ended up becoming a thing called Legends of the Dark Knight. I think it's called Legends of the Dark Knight, issue 2, which was initially a web-only thing. It was written by B. Claymore, but then they ended up publishing it as like a series as well. So I did issue 2 with a cover. Was a Batman thing. Then I did, then Gotham by Midnight came up. These things just happen every now and again. It's not like I have a long existing relationship with DC where I know people. I tend to have a curse where when I work with someone at a company, the editor that I'm dealing with either gets fired or leaves. That's happened like 5 times on projects. Not sure if that happened on, that kind of happened on Gotham too. Yeah, and it did. She left the company after that. I don't think it was because of me, but I feel like it was. I'm believing that they all leave because of me. So I don't think that curse is sticking around, because I did do a thing for DC recently, and they want me to do a couple more, and they're still at the company. So we'll see. But yeah, no, Gotham was a lot of fun. Got to work with an artist who turns out to be a writer as well. So Ray's awesome. He's a very thoughtful person. He puts a lot of thinking into his stuff. He's a true artist. That's the only way I can describe him that way. It was a lot of fun. And we had to put Batman in the book a little bit. My only quibble is it was called Gotham Before Midnight instead of, or by midnight, wasn't it? Which means before, which means Gotham at like 9 p.m., which is like, no, you want Gotham after midnight. That's when the fun time. That's if you're going to do a horror kind of oriented book, you want it to, you don't do it at 9 p.m. You do it at 3 a.m. So it was a lot of fun. We had to insert Batman in it a little bit, and it was mostly a very non-superhero thing, which is a little disappointing in that it was really a Spectre book, but it was Jim Corrigan was mostly just his regular self in it for a while. He didn't get to turn into Spectre much. I really wanted to, and it was my first kind of real, the thing for the web initially, notwithstanding, it was my first like dabble in superhero true stuff, traditional superhero, shall we say, because Hellspawn's a superhero. So I got to draw the Spectre for a bit, which I thought about as I didn't realize it until they asked me. I was like, oh, he's actually probably a pretty good fit for like me trying to do a moody thing. So, and then since then I've been asked to do and done a little bit of Superman, which is the furthest character from my mind I ever thought I would be suitable or asked to draw, but took it as a challenge. And I liked what I did. But it was a Superman Authority. It was either called Superman, Batman, The Authority, or a combination of thereof. So I got to draw a whole bunch of those sort of characters. So, and they didn't really give me any revisions, but I was trying to be tame with my work as well and try to fit with trying to fit into the superhero mold a little, rather than just going, I'm going to do what I want. So, and they liked it. So we will see. And they've got a couple more things planned. So we'll see if I can adapt myself to some other stuff I never thought I'd be drawing. We will see. But I'm not going mainstream, I promise. I'm still sticking with my doing my own thing mostly. So
I was gonna say, so it sounds like you've got a little bit of a relationship going on with DC now. That's interesting. I hadn't heard about the Superman. Is the Superman Batman Authority out?
it was like a one-shot thing. It came out 3 months ago, I think. So it's like it was a 40-page book, but I only did 20 pages because the book takes place. And I thought it was a really good idea. This was thanks to Philip Kennedy Johnson. I always get the 3 names mixed up. I just call him Phil. He's a super nice guy, the writer. He does the Superman stuff generally too. But it takes place in like 2 dimensions. So it was a really clever idea to have one artist do the one normal dimension, the traditional superhero stuff, which was Trevor Erskine, I believe. And then I did this other weird dimension, which suits my style a bit more. But God help them if they're asking me to do some stuff in more of a regular universe thing. I guess they liked what I did. They didn't hate it, which is shocking to me, but I'll go with it because I like I am it's nice to be at the point in a career where you just like challenges. I mean, money is money. Obviously, you need to live, and being paid is nice, but being asked to do things that you'd never thought about before is the way you evolve and change. And so people could ask me to do some weird stuff, and I'll probably say yes. But also, it's nice to feel like coming full circle, in that I was always an indie guy and doing the weird stuff that kind of got popular for a while, and then I just stick to my lane. And then, but to be asked to then dabble in the traditional, people with capes sort of thing, it's like, oh, now it's time. Now it's time to come home to what I read as a kid, and put my little piece in that. So it'll be nice. We'll see. Hopefully it won't suck.
Man, now I've got to go track that down. I spent a little bit of time in the hospital, and then I've just
No, I
fallen
heard. I'm
behind
so
on
sorry.
books. And no biggie. What doesn't kill you makes you stupider, or I think that's right. At least it is for
So I've
me.
never been to hospital. Except when I was born.
The squitter. I did not ask
Yes.
you about the squitter.
Well, that brings up the whole other drama.
I'm I'm
Not really a
sorry.
drama. No, 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 no. So I want to say, like, I'll pick a year 2010 or so. I got to know a couple of guys. Well, a lot of guys. I was around Chicago. I ended up moving there for a while too. We formed a little company, which was a lot of fun and a good learning experience, and I had some great relationships there. But it turned out, of the four partners, one was a retailer, one was a kind of a tech market. I'm doing an injustice to his talents, but he inhabits the biomedical field generally. That's what he was always working on in the background. He had interests in that, but he was the business guy. He knew stuff. He was smart, and he also knew the gallery scene and high up in art collecting type stuff. And then there was me, and another artist by the name of Menton 3, who was also a bit of a fine artist. When it turned out, after like multiple really successful Kickstarter campaigns, that we were basically being bled dry for a couple of years, and that one of the partners wasn't doing any real work, just basically taking all the money. So I probably raised $250,000 for a company and I probably saw, if I was ever lucky, 10% of that. No, sorry, 15 to 20, shall we say. While the other creative in the company wasn't really doing anything to benefit the company. So I was bankrolling these books, and it turned out money was being spent before the books were completely like sent out. So each successive crowdfunder would deal with the one before that, which is not the way I would ever work had I had any spine or awareness of that. I should probably say something and query things and get involved, because when you're dealing with people with like sociopathic tendencies, they kind of rule the agenda, and they kind of push you into making split decisions rather than thinking about things and agreeing with things in the instant. So we were always on the back foot, shall we say. And it took about 2 years for us to realize that, this isn't good. But the problem with that, I'm getting into a rant now. The Squitter was one of those books, and it was a really fun book. It was the first one with I think I did it through my account, but directly my named account. Had some great success. Got the book done. It was, no, it was fine. Yeah, dealing with my first experience dealing with an overseas printer in China, which didn't go well, because they didn't understand that I wasn't American. So I understood what the metric system was. It's a horrible thing to do with designing slipcases. But I'm really proud of that book. I got that book done under some pretty rough circumstances at a time too. So, but the next book after that was meant to be the final book that I would do, that I would take one for the team, so to speak, and do a project that would rectify any previous financial issues of fixing anything else. We did that, but the problem was someone had a habit of frittering the money away and spending on various other things. So there was no money left for that actual project. So I ended up spending my life savings mostly fulfilling it. That was a book called Dagon, which was adapting a Lovecraft thing, which was actually the biggest crowdfunding thing I ever did. It raised $140,000. So, but the Squidder was all delivered. That was fun. That was nice. And then we took it to IDW because we established a publishing agreement. So we'd crowdfund our own versions, a deluxe version, and then you'd run what you'd already done, just a dumbed down retail version through the direct market for everyone else that had never heard of the book, because most people still hadn't. And that did really well. So it came out through IDW after the crowdfunding thing. That's probably a very long-winded way to shape one comic you asked about. But that's where that book came from. And the company was called 44 Flood initially. But I own it, the whole thing. So there was never a company that owned part of a property.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm still living down the issues that being in business with a certain person got me into, because I have a sense of shame, and I also don't like failing at things, and also being terribly poor. So, so hopefully I'm coming back now, because I just started doing crowdfunding again. So, and I will actually deliver it to everyone very quickly.
I am so sorry to hear that, man. I knew things that had gotten ugly, and that was one of the things that I did want to clear up is
It's a weird thing, because like he left the company first because he was alleging, and I wasn't anyone who kicked up a fuss, which is probably a character trait I need to work on. I need to like stick up for things sometimes. But he left the company because we started giving him pushback, because he was claiming he didn't get any respect, which was quite amusing at that point. But since then, he's ostracized himself from pretty much anyone I knew in Chicago. I mean, we even had a Facebook group at a time just to talk about and figure out what was going on with him, because he kind of burned so many people. It was kind of weird. But you learn a lot about human nature, about how people are sometimes with money, and if you should be in business with people who are friends, and if you want to keep them as friends, maybe, or yeah, I learned a lot, and I certainly learned a lot about crowdfunding. So I understood after a while the potential for it, and the landscape's long changed since then too. Now everyone's trying to do it, and people are doing it differently. It's not I don't think it's the new fancy thing anymore. Now it's just another thing, but it's still, I'm doing one right now. It's had moderate success. I'm quite happy with it, considering I'm using a different platform. But yeah, you live and learn. That's probably the other and the biggest learning experience that's changed me in recent years, that I'm still living with the scars of, because it gave me a lot of anxiety attacks. And when you have a sense of shame sucks. When you feel like you've failed people and have angry people at you because they didn't get a book, but you have no money to give it to them. Yeah. So I'm slowly finalizing the last little bits. So 98% fulfilled. So, but there is such potential in crowdfunding that, and it's sort of the last string in the bow of how I do things, that it's too good to not do the hard work and get back there. So I won't let it defeat me. And he's since gone off to become a tattoo artist, apparently. So more power to him. He doesn't do cons. He's on record with me. I always remember he said he hates comics. He just liked it for the money. He did some interiors for X-Files and a few other things. So yeah, you live and learn. That's my horror story.
wow.
Sure, I don't know.
It seems like you're bouncing back very strongly. Your digital
Maybe.
Well, your digital presence is unique and interesting, and it was really cool to hear you talk earlier about the way that you fetishize the physical object.
Oh, it's a good word for it. Oh, dude. So here's the thing. What are comics if not fetish items? Absolutely. So yeah, I'll try to fetishize them further.
But I like how you integrate that through your digital presence and and what you present and how you present it. And I was curious, you did have those earlier disasters with crowdsourcing. but you're also now successfully crowdsourcing stuff. And as somebody who's been
Well, the
around,
success was there initially as well. So let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. I've got to get these people their books. So,
well, but I'm
but I have
saying,
it all sorted out now. So I've learned a lot. So
I was going to say, you've seen both sides of it,
yeah. Sometimes actually like raising too much money and having too many people buy the book is a problem in itself. So if you've got to fulfill thousands versus hundreds, that's a big issue. So sorry, I just had to interject there.
No, you're fine.
Like, I'm not out of the woods yet. It's like I got to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak. So
you've been around the block and you've seen the best and kind of the nasty part of it as well. And I was curious,
yeah.
a lot of people are saying at this point that that's probably in 10, 15 years for those of us that do still fetishize the physical object, that's how we're going to have to get our books. And I was curious how much or little you would agree with that, or, what your retort to that might be.
It's just a change in business model. It's sad in a way, but it's just I mean, it won't be the final part of the process. The final part of the process would be if comics never exist anymore. But comics went from being a huge, expansive industry where it was on every spinner rack in a supermarket or wherever, right? They were everywhere. Then now they're in small stores, and yes, online has changed a lot, but they still have relatively large companies in charge of them and distributing and putting them out and creating them. So if we get to the point where I can see I mean, it's healthy and it's a trend not just in comics, but in a bunch of things, going direct to consumer. I'm seeing a lot of companies do that anyway. Some of them are even making their own virtual crowdfunding web pages for particular projects. So they'll just literally crowdfund off their own customer base, which is without even using Kickstarter or Indiegogo or anything like that. But to allow individuals to create and do it all themselves, if they don't mind a bit of hard work, it's way better than just working through a company, a middleman, essentially. If you can cut out a middleman, it's healthier for the people that create the stuff potentially. But it doesn't give you the economy of scale, and it doesn't give you that, even though it's in comics, that slight level of promotion. Not that comics do much promotion at all these days, but yeah. So if that ends up being the only way we can get at least original comics, I mean, because the Marvel DC stuff, someone huge is going to always own that regardless and be putting stuff out or making beanbags out of it. But everyone else, we stand a chance of just being in the marketplace for anyone that hopefully still buys comics, but then cultivating that audience and having that audience vaguely stick around. If the big comic publishers aren't doing that anymore, then that's a problem too. So I don't know, but I know that cutting out middlemen is always a nice thing, and doing things and succeeding on your own feels great. So, and if you retain control over your creation first and foremost, I mean, it means you can still do stuff with it. But I'm always of the belief that the person who should benefit the most from what they create should be the initial creator. Everyone else can make money off something too, but that person has to be in the room, so to speak, and financially better off than not, which is not the real normal history of comic books, is it? So
Yeah, it seems to be the antithesis of comic books, unfortunately, the more and more that
yeah,
I learn about them. And final thing, I swear I will leave you alone.
I'm not bothered. Just so you know, I'm not bothered.
Well,
If you're bored of me, that's fine too.
no, I just have to apologize. I always feel bad. I do these 3-4 hour marathons, and
I'd be the same way, man. But I'm enjoying it. But also, it takes a while to draw out memories sometimes, because my memory is crap. So, but you've been doing a good job at that. And sorry if I ramble or go on a tangent, because like you'll ask a question and it'll remind me of the other thing, like, oh, that was a big thing. But I got to say that to give it context to the other thing. So
no, please ramble more. That's the best part about doing these
like
long form interviews.
The thing with the Squidder is that through my Squid Army fan club thing, I'm always asking, like, do you want a sequel? Because I want to do a sequel one day. Because I own the whole thing because it was done through that company. But so far they keep choosing other things. But one day I'm just going to do it.
You've got you did Motor, I think, or Modir, Modie.
I'm not like Norwegian, so I'm not sure how you completely say it, because it uses the little squeal thing.
Oh, okay, it does. Okay.
My wife chose that name. She likes to do her research and be very authentic. I'm going to call it. It means mother, but it's I'm going to say Modia as well. So yeah, I finished. Well, I'm doing a one shot. Yeah, I've got a copy right there. Yeah, I did a one shot with my wife, who perennially wants to write and has written a lot of stuff. Some of it not comics, and it's much more expansive. So, we've been tasked, and I promised her for many years, it's like, look, get you to write a comic and I'll draw it. And so we finally did that. And it's not out yet, but it's a sort of a Viking folklore kind of horror comic that she wrote and I drew.
Interesting. I couldn't find out much about it online. I found a few little,
Yeah,
like,
because I've just been
tiny
teasing it a little bit.
solicitations. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not out through the direct market yet or anything. It'll be I got to send it out to my patrons next month, and then I'll be selling other copies online and at shows of this limited printing. But then hopefully it'll be collected in a larger book of a Viking anthology thing that I already did one of, called Blood Songs. Then I'll do a second volume, and with luck, that can also be published as a series of one shots or something through someone at some point too. Because I do treat every market as a separate thing, because the direct market has no real bearing, from my experience, at least historically, on doing your own little thing or selling it at shows, because there's so many people that don't know anything because they don't read social media because the algorithms won't let them or anything. So hopefully we'll be out in the direct market at some point too. Or people can just buy my copies, signed and numbered, which goes to the whole exclusivity and fetishization and making people feel special with what they're getting, because they're getting the first edition sort of thing.
And for anybody who's wondering that's watching this, there will be links in the description for all of this wonderful, wonderful limited.
Oh, I got a plug.
Fetish items, signed comics.
It is about the experience.
Oh,
yeah. I hope. I get really. I don't hear it often, and I'm always so worried how I come across at conventions, because I do have like a weird sense of humor sometimes, and because I'm not American, and one aspect culturally of America, not everyone obviously, is they're very literal people sometimes, compared to like British humor. So if I just casually say I'm going to put a baby in a blender, and it's part of a joke, right? It's obviously I'm not serious, but some people will be like, "What?" It's like, so you got to tone it down a little. So I'm always worried that I accidentally offend people. But because at a convention, you want to give good experiences, and be it on paper or in person. So I don't know why I just said that, because I went on a tangent on what you said. So
that's why I do these interviews, man. Delicious tangents. And you've also got a book up right now that the name is escaping me. The hardcover.
Here's the thing: I hate talking like I'm plugging my own shit generally, except for the nature of how I'm doing something, and that other people should do it too, which is the whole crowdfunding, Patreon, fan club aspect, and making things special. If you're talking about what I'm doing coming up, then I'm doing another book called Squid Spit, which is sporadically coming out on my Patreon. Is that the one you were mentioning?
It was the hardcover that you had up
okay.
People can buy right now.
Oh, the actual campaign thing I have. Yeah, the campaign thing I have right now.
Yes.
Yeah, man. It's Original Hate.
Yeah, Original Hate. That's what it was. I'm so sorry. My brain is
How dare
fried.
You? How dare you? No, so I did that one a few years ago. It was actually the second project I did on my fan club Patreon. And they take a while to produce, because you do 2 pages a week on average for a project that they see. So the whole book is like 130 story pages at least. So that takes that much time. But I produced single large issues of like 40 something pages each. And then I finally bit the bullet, and I'll collect it into a hardcover, because to me, the hardcover is a nice finality of a project. It's a collector's item type. It'll stand the test of time. It goes on a bookshelf. It ain't floppy. So yeah, I started getting back into the thing, and so far about 150 or so people want to copy my book, which is nice, because the economies of scale mean that's all me. I mean, there's costs involved, but I'm not having to sell several thousand copies through a regular publisher to make the same amount of money for me. It's nice. I mean, obviously, I'd like to sell a few more copies, but yeah. And it's a Neanderthal revenge horror thing. And now I'm sounding like this is a spiel, but it's my coming back to crowdfunding. So
No, that's what I was gonna say. It's your triumphant return. There's a physical object. It's gonna be going out to people.
it's my tentative return because it's on Indiegogo. Actually, so here's the salesman to me. If you go to originalhate.com, that sends you right there. No, because this is the thing. You've got to be on as a freelancer, and if you want to do comics and not just work for Marvel or DC, shall we say, you've got to try and be entrepreneurial. And I'm trying, shall we say. So part of that is learning all these weird things. It's not weird, but obviously tech people know a lot more. But yeah, you can buy a domain name and just have it point to anything that you want it to go to, so that it's much easier to say than a whole bunch of backslashes and extra letters and weird things on a website that's not your own. So you can just say originalhate.com. This is like the business sense that I wish more people, I want to learn more myself, but this is what people need. So, especially in the new age. So yeah, it's my quiet coming back on a slightly different website that's not Kickstarter, but hopefully I'll be back on Kickstarter at some point too. So I like them all, but in the fetishization specialness stakes, Indiegogo has this thing where they offer you a special tier, a special secret tier. So I can send a group of people, and only that group of people, to a special one that no one else sees. And so that is the beauty of Indiegogo for my fan club, because they get a special deal, a special version. So, because comics are special.
They are, my friend.
And I certainly am special too, and not in the way that most people think. Well, probably in that way, actually. Because I would assume most people are thinking.
I realized when we were talking way earlier in your career, I never asked you about your relocation from Australia and here to the States and kind of what precipitated that. Do you have
something
just a few
really
minutes to
boring.
talk about that?
Yeah. As I've learned twice in my life now, economic boom times kind of suck unless you're actually part of that economic boom of whatever the industry is. So in Australia, it was mining in my state. I come from a state bigger than Alaska, but it's mostly desert, but it's incredibly minerally rich. And so mining was booming. And there's only one big city called Perth in Western Australia, which is the third of the damn continent. So you had an influx of miners, and machine operators and everyone to do with that. So a lot of people were making huge money selling like iron ore to China. It precipitated everything going up hugely in price, right? So I was earning good money in the beginning of my career. I thought, I'm well on my way to earning millions if I was responsible and just kept it, and everything was going the same way because the exchange rate for Australia was so good into Australian dollars. I was doubling my money, shall we say. And in your early 20s, that's like, yes. But then the mining boom happened. And what that did was affected the currency exchange rates. So because Australia was doing so well, our currency shot up in value and America was doing kind of crap. So their value went down. So suddenly the dollar was reaching, dollar for dollar, Aussie dollar, American dollar, was reaching almost parity. So my income, regardless of what I was doing, being at like the high point in my career at that moment, my income had just been slashed in half. And my rent was going up like substantially, and everything was changing, and not for the better for anyone not connected to the mining industry. So as I was already married to an American, we moved to America. But the process was made easier. The one good thing George W. Bush did for me personally was they made a special visa just for Australians. And I believe it was called an E3 visa. So that way an employer could just say, I need that guy. They have a particular talent that no one else here has, but I need them. Because they're from Australia, it's even easier. I don't understand why. That's how I ended up working to cut some red tape to work in the offices of IDW for a year. I was, I believe, their only exclusive signed artist for a year, which never worked out. It wasn't good because they didn't understand how, they didn't really understand how art was made, in that you don't work 9 to 5. You might work all weekend to get a project done, and then forgive that person for then having a nap and sleeping and not coming in really early on Monday morning. But they got their work done. So that was kind of burning me out. It was killing me. So I was like, you know what? I don't need to do that anymore. So San Diego, I moved to San Diego with IDW. So, and ironically, I'm now back in San Diego because my wife is from California, so she needs the warmth. So yeah. So I've been in America for years now. I forget how many, but since I think 2007 overall. Yeah, I'm not a citizen yet. I probably should be. I will be, maybe one day.
Well, I know I have beat you over the head with questions, man.
No, I liked it all. Don't ever stop. You're worse than I am. Stop apologizing.
Well, I was just going to say I super appreciate you humoring everything, and I think I've thrown about everything in the kitchen sink at you. Is there anything that I could have possibly missed or that you'd like to plug that you've got going on or anything like that?
I think we dealt with obviously all my major projects and trials and tribulations therein. And man, you brought up some stuff I forgot I even did. Honestly, like the Voodoo Child thing. So you've been in comics long enough when you forget everything you've done, and you have to be reminded, which is it's interesting because your brain can only hold so much. No, I hope I just did enough in-depth retrospective-y kind of crap on to get my version of events of my life out there.
No, this has been incredibly interesting, man.
I hope so, because I would say that if anyone is getting into comics or is already in comics that don't have much experience or ever have a question to someone, who's already been around the block a little bit with some experience, although I'm not a main big two guy, I can't talk to any much of that, but I'm always open to questions and helping people through my own experiences if I can, or offering advice. Not that you should take it necessarily, but I'm happy to offer it. Because the only thing I really want is people who capitalize on their own creativity and benefit the most, because no one else should more than you, if you're a creative. So yeah, and I hope to be around doing comics for a while yet.
I hope you stick around, man. We need more people like you. Those are wise, wise words. And I think they're the words that are going to carry us into the next generation of creators and creatives when we, with the unionization of image and all of that stuff. I think
That'll
we're
be
finally.
interesting. That'll be interesting. It's very weirdly political, but well, I mean, that's a whole nother ballgame. I'm pro-union, and I want obviously good working conditions and more money for everyone in comics. I have a slight quibble with the one demand they have or had. I'm not sure if it's all gone through. That I'm back. Am I back?
All right, there you go.
Crap. No, it was only about like potentially vetting content from people who aren't the people who normally make those decisions. It's like it seems a bit weird and a bit of an overreach, shall we say, in an effort to, shall we say, what's the word? Overshoot the issue of problematic people being published, shall we say. And like, where do you draw the line on who's problematic and what is the problem? Because the one big issue I see in that is like, Twitter is a hellscape at the best of times because it's an open-air personal diary for most people, sharing opinions on anything and everything. But if you say you have the opinion of being pro-Palestinian, shall we say, and saying some stuff against Israel, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying some people consider that anti-Semitic. And therefore, you've suddenly triggered this potential clause, and it's like, it creates a minefield, so to speak. So it's like, it's interesting times. We'll see how it pans out. I'm not going either way on it, but I just hope to do comics, stick to my little lane, and I'll just do my own thing. But I'll dabble in anything anyone wants me to do. So I'm lucky like that. I like being on my own, mostly.
I'm just hoping it's a step in the right direction. I did a
I'm
piece
still alive. Like I'm not homeless yet, so yeah, thanks to the people that buy my books. Thank you.
And hopefully, using the links in the description below, there will be more people to buy your stuff. Thank you again so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Um,
Welcome.
it has been infinitely interesting. As you know, somebody who's been reading comics for a long time, I can't thank you enough for the role that you've played in bringing back horror, and also the pivotal role that I think you have played in, despite what you think of the term, creator-owned properties. I really do think that the success of like 30 Days of Night and a few other things really blew the doors open for a sweeping change that I can only hope continues with stuff like this. So, thank you.
I hate taking compliments, so I'm just going to say thank you. No, I think you're right on a bunch of the stuff, but like, man, it's hard to take a compliment. I don't normally get people. I don't think of that stuff myself, so I appreciate it. Thank you. But, dude, no, thank you for doing your channel, and I appreciate all the hard work.
Man, that means the world to me.
Because here's the thing: people will be watching some of your videos based on the comic history years from now. Like you're making stuff for posterity as long as the internet exists or YouTube exists. You're making real, like it's not flash in the pan stuff. You're doing research and you're doing real stuff on real important figures and people. And even if they're not that important, they're still, someone should document, what happened and the amazing stories of how things happened to get the books we love.
That's
like,
what
I'm slowly watching the Mario Gully one because I know, you liked Ant. I never really got into Ant, but like I'm starting to appreciate it more now. Now I'm seeing his life journey.
I see. Like when I originally saw Ant, I hated Ant. Not gonna lie. I saw issue 1 and I was like, this is garbage. McFarlane wannabe cheesecake pen. I do not do adult comics, man. I just can't. I don't have a problem with them. I am not, speaking derogatorily. Guys like Michael Linsner, incredible artists. You couldn't put a gun to my head to make me pay for it, though. It's just not.
I read Dawn a little bit because it was pretty art. So
it's great.
I skipped Ant for the same reason, but now I know the story. It's like it's amazing because of you.
I heard about him and Eric Larson, and that was just because a guy who'd been reading Savage Dragon for 20 years was like, oh yeah, well Larson screwed over Gully, so I hate Larson now. And I was like, whoa, I think you got that maybe a little bit twisted, buddy. So I love shining a light on little tiny bits of minutia like that. It's what it's all about.
Well, you're really being the grown up in the room, coming to a lot of comic book politics between people and getting the story straight, or at least getting both sides out there, or explaining things. Because there's so much about feuds and bullshit that happens, and we're all crazy people. So thank you for your service in bringing some clarity to some of it.
Well, you're all people, and that's what makes it interesting. And thank you for your candidness in this interview, because it really can get dicey for me sometimes when I'm having these conversations with people, and I'm like, so, about those few years, we didn't talk to that certain guy who might have called you a bunch of fuck words on the internet. So, thanks so much for doing this, man. Seriously, I appreciate you taking all of this time to humor all of my insane questions. I cannot thank you enough for all of your rants and asides. They have made this one of the most interesting interviews I've done. And I thank you again for doing it, man. So I hope you have a great night.
You can thank the YouTube algorithm for finding your channel. And I was like, oh, shit, I'm going to subscribe now. This is the thing. So thank you very much.
And for anybody wondering, if you want to support Ben, then you can use the descriptions in the below to check out his Patreon page. I will also have links to his new book, Original Hate, that will be up. And there will be even more additional links to other ways that you can support his creative endeavors. So thanks for joining me. I hope you all enjoyed, maybe even learned something. If you did like what you saw, make sure you hit that like button. Think about getting in the comment section below and letting me know. Share these videos with your friends. And if you really enjoyed what you saw, make sure you Hulk smash that subscribe button. If you do that, make sure you ding the little notification bell so you never miss another video or premiere again. If you feel like you're in a position to help the channel grow, think about about using the links in the description below to sign up for my Patreon page. For as little as $3 a month, you get access to tons of behind-the-scenes posts, updates, uncut interviews, and other exclusive content, including your name in the credits. If you want to support the channel but Patreon is not your thing, have no fear. There are also links to my Ko-Fi page where you can make one-time donations towards specific goals or just tip the channel, or you can finally use the join button right here on YouTube. That's right, after 2 years of fighting with AdSense, I can finally offer you membership here on YouTube. All you have to do is hit that little join button to make sure you check out the different tiers for the perks that fit you best. If that's not enough, there's also links to an Amazon list that you can use to donate research material for future episodes, as well as equipment that the channel needs, and you can even pick up your very own JerkComic shirts like the ones you see on the screen right now, as well as tons of other merch using the links in the description below. As always, this episode was brought to you by the Jerk Broadcasting System, as well as generous grants from the patrons, Ko-Fi, and YouTube members you see on the screen now. I'd also like to personally thank my loyal Wednesday warriors, Adam Coburn, Channel 10, Mike Dolan, Super Chasen, David Arroyo, John Utley, Luke Anderson, and Mike Dolan again. You wonderful people make these videos possible, and I cannot thank you enough for the support of this channel. I cannot wait to see where the next year takes this channel with the help of amazing people such as yourselves. Thanks again for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed, maybe even learned something, and as always, I really, truly, and honestly ask only two things. Keep hitting those local shops, and keep reading comics.